Hello out there, and welcome to the first episode of Creative by Craft. My name is Santos, better known to some under my alias Monoverse, and I'm a music producer, DJ, record label founder, and now podcast host from New Jersey. I've been lucky enough to meet a ton of creative people over the years, and after the pandemic, I was thinking of ways to A, reconnect with them, and B, showcase their talent to the world. The podcast is going to be loosely about creativity and feature professionals as well as hobbyists and people who just work creative jobs in otherwise uncreative worlds. I think when it comes to people who are creative or work in creative industries, because of the nature of social media, you only really get to see their output unless they're doing podcasts or interviews. Of course, there are creatives who do share a lot of themselves on social media, but as you'll see in some of these interviews, many of us share the same sentiment about social media that just doesn't get the point across. In any case, I think a podcast is probably the best way to get to know the person behind an alias or the person writing the words in the book that you're reading. Plus, I just really love sharing what my friends are up to and the amazing work that they're doing. So I do want this show to be as much about each individual creator as it is about creativity in general. For the first episode, I'm interviewing Cory Goldsmith, who is a lead software engineer at iZotope. Even in spite of a few recording issues and a ton of editing that had to be done because I didn't really set things up right, I'm still super happy with this episode, and I think it perfectly represents what I want from this podcast. So thank you for checking this out. If you want to find more episodes, head to creativebycraft.com. Of course, likes and shares and subscriptions are much appreciated, and I'm looking forward to seeing where this podcast takes us. Hope you enjoyed the first episode of Creative by Craft, my interview with Cory Goldsmith. Cory, thank you for doing this. Welcome to the Creative by Craft podcast. First episode.
Hey Santos, thanks for having me on the debut episode. I'm really excited about this. This is gonna be awesome.
I reached out to you. I wanted you to be the first guest because I feel like, we both come from the music production space, but you have such an interesting background. So before we even start, I'd like you to kind of present an overview of what you do and why you do it.
Well, thanks, man. I'm glad someone considers my background interesting. I mean, I guess you could say it is. I'm very lucky to do what I do. Okay, where should I start? So it's April 12th, 1990. My mom is in the hospital. No, I'm kidding. A
true storyteller.
Yeah, exactly. Starting from the very beginning. Music was always a big part of my life. Speaking of my mom, I mean, she and her father and mother, like just basically my mom's side of the family was always very musical. And so I was kind of brought up in that environment. And like, I joined like the school band at a very young age and did that, that continued. I was even in like marching band for a few years in college and then also in high school, but always really wanted to start doing something of my own versus playing in like an organized, like school band thing. So I was in, like bands in high school and college, playing guitar. And then later I was playing bass and singing.
All right. So before we go further, just out of curiosity, ever do drums or anything like that?
Yeah, I was in drumline and marching band.
I knew it.
Yeah.
Why the people who do techno, I feel like, just have some kind of drum background?
I mean, it makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Like, I feel like sometimes, it's weird. We can get into this further later, but I feel like almost my need for some melodies sometimes holds me back. I mean, not entirely, but it's a learned skill, learning to hone in like your melodic content and knowing what's appropriate and what isn't.
Yeah, super tough
for the genre. But like it's really useful having like that drumline experience, for instance, because I know how to syncopate rhythms and like do more intricate rhythms, but also because I wasn't like a drummer first and I was more of like a guitar and bass player, it kind of helps me hone in that rhythmic content in the sense that I'm not getting too fancy. Like, it's not like I'm going to be doing like 5 tuplets although that could be cool, but like I did a song way back like several years ago that had like a drop that was in 6/4, and which, or like 3/2, whatever you want to count it as time signature wise. Yeah, and exactly. And I noticed that when I was playing it live, like people didn't really understand how to dance to it, even though it's just 2 extra beats. Like you're just going to end up on your left foot the first time and then the right foot the second time, but you can still move. Like, I don't know. But after that, I was like, okay, maybe I should like
tone it down a little bit.
I was trying to try something different, but maybe I should not like go too crazy. And I didn't even think that was too crazy. But either way, it seems like
there's a great meme that's floating around where it's like all music is 4/4. If you just stop counting, you nerd.
You stupid nerd. Yeah. I saw that too. I love that meme so much. Yeah, no, it's good. I mean, odd numbers, when you multiply them by 2, they're even. So like that works. Which, this leads in very well into, the next part of my story, which is that while I my band in college, we actually were doing pretty well. Like we were going on little mini tours in the Southeast and stuff like that. And they actually got bigger even after I left. Why did I leave?
Yeah,
well, because I loved
right?
counting. Yeah, I loved counting way too much. I mean, and that is kind of true. Not the counting part, but just math. I was studying chemistry and math in college at the University of Georgia. Go Dogs! I have to give that shout because we're national champions, and I've been waiting my whole life for that. But moving on. Basically, I fell really in love with what I was doing, which was like physical chemistry and like doing quantum mechanics and math and all this stuff. And I was thinking to myself, okay, I'm in a hardcore band, like we're doing well, but it's also not really sustainable. And like, I want to have a family and kids someday. And, funny story is 10 years later, still no family or kids. But at the time, that's what I was thinking. I was young and naive. And
your next choice is to get a PhD, right? So
yeah, that was my next choice.
And not like super easy to have work-life balance, right? So
it wasn't. It was funny because when I got in, so yeah, just to exactly say what Santos just said, like I went to get my PhD in chemical physics and I went to Colorado. And what I noticed when I got there is that, everyone got like married or in a relationship before they got to grad school because they knew they were going to like, have like no social life. And in a way I kind of threaded the needle there because I had fully given up on music at that point. I was like, I'm going to be like a Nobel Prize winner. Such an idiot. But the thing is, everyone that comes into grad school, like that's kind of the mindset they have. They're like, I'm going to be the next Einstein. Like I'm going to be the next great scientist because, all these people are coming from their colleges and like, they were like big man on campus or big woman on campus at that point. Like, oh, I'm going to get a PhD. I'm like, I'm so cool. But then you go and it's just all those people, right? It's all of the best of the best. And you just all of a sudden you go from feeling like super smart to just the dumbest person in the universe, like real quick. Like that's
kind of like the music industry in general too,
it is,
right? Like, it's like you realize when you're 5 years in that, okay, not only do you have like the most talented people, but the hardest working and the people with the most resources. And that's your competition if you think about it that way, which I try not to.
Yeah. I have struggled in the past with it, but I think my grad school experience kind of helped me shift my mindset to competing with myself more than other people, like just always being better than you were before. Right. Because if you think about the people that you're quote unquote competing with, like all you're going to do is build grudges. You're going to get like what they call producer envy. You're going to get all sorts of things that are unhealthy. Like just mentally. And it's just, it doesn't allow you to create and perform at your highest, at your best.
It's a recipe for burnout, I feel like, where it's like
100%.
I've realized that to sustain, to just keep coming back to it over the long haul is to shift from like comparing yourself to external things and just saying, okay, the competition is internal and really it's just about me getting better. And I think that applies to everything where it's like, whether it's, physics or math or software engineering or music, it's really about like turning that focus around so that you
Inward.
can just show up consistently. Otherwise, you're just gonna, you're gonna get real sad real fast.
Yes, and it also prevents you from like learning from other people too, because you see people as competitors and not colleagues and people who can help. Because no one is going. I mean, that's another thing you learn doing science is like what you're studying for like your PhD is like a blip
Yep.
of the knowledge of humanity, right? And no one can know everything. It's just not the human brain is not evolved to the point where it can take on all information. It never will. Whether we kill ourselves off or not, it will never get to that point because, I mean, by necessity, we have to create this kind of knowledge base from everyone. I guess if we become a hive mind, get sci-fi here, then maybe, okay, then you can say it. But no, I mean, that and also, oh man, I just had the thought on my mind. But like not
actually the thing that I want to say about that is it doesn't feel like you have like an instinct to be like, oh, we should know everything. Like, why don't I know that? Whenever somebody says like, oh, you don't listen to this band or listen to this podcast, you don't know about this thing. And you're like, your initial response is to feel like bad about that. Right. But I'm trying to like over time realize like, there's no way to know everything. And that applies to everything. And
correct. And not only that, it leads to people trusting YouTube videos for their information and assuming that they can learn everything. And that's a whole nother rant. We're not even in the meat of my story yet. And we already have so much to talk about. I mean,
this is why I wanted you to be the first guest, because I was like,
I'm honored. Yeah.
Like, honestly, like, I mean, obviously, like you did chemical physics, and you mentioned quantum physics, which, my alias as an artist is Monoverse, right? And I'm the perfect example of that guy who like went on YouTube and was like, let me look into quantum physics. I found this term that just means one universe. And I was like, maybe it's a good track title. And then it became my artist alias. And I was like, every time I mention that in an interview, it's like, I'm a fraud. I know nothing about quantum physics.
I mean, I wouldn't consider you a fraud at all. Like, it's a dope alias. I love it. You wouldn't be the first person to, for lack of a better term, appropriate a scientific term without being a scientist. But also it doesn't matter. Like, you can still understand concepts of science without having a PhD, but there are people who presume to know more than people who have PhDs, and that I think is usually a pretty
it's problematic.
It's problematic, and it's recently kind of led to large problems. And that's not to say that there aren't things to criticize about the scientific community. There 100% are. But if we criticize the wrong parts of it, then the right parts of it never get criticized, and we can't fix those issues, right? Which we can go into that
definitely
later too. But just to kind of like tie up the knot to get to where I am today, basically, because you might be saying, oh, well, this guy must be a world-renowned physicist at this point. No, that's absolutely not true. And we were talking earlier about like, being able to have a social life with having a PhD. And I realized pretty quickly in like maybe my second year of my doctorate that like giving up on music just like isn't possible for me. Like I missed performing. I missed making music. And I had started to kind of fiddle around a garage band in college because it's nice sometimes to just make music on your own and not have to what I call write music by committee. As much as I loved my bandmates. Yeah, I mean, but it is like that, right? Because you can write a part for a song that just totally expresses how you feel and just has so much emotion, and then it just takes like a few of your bandmates to be like, yeah, I'm not really feeling it. And then then you're just like, okay, cool, bro. Like I put my heart and soul into that, and now you're just saying like, oh, it just doesn't work for you. All right, sweet. And then other times it's the opposite, where like somebody writes a part and you're not feeling it, but the rest of the band is, so it goes in the song.
Oh, for sure.
And that's fine. I loved playing with the people I played with and had some of the greatest times of my life doing it. But sometimes you just want full creative control, And so I had started producing. I get into grad school. I realize, man, I really wish I was still doing music. So I kind of started leading like a double life during that time, like producing and DJing by night, like going to shows, waking up super tired the next morning to like do my research, which, you know, it had its consequences on both ends of the spectrum.
Oh, for sure.
It had an effect on my PhD. It took me 6 years to do my doctorate, maybe even 6.5 years. It usually takes people around 5 or so, God. 5 or 6.
Not
so
an
like,
year.
you know, I mean, yeah, but it was worth it.
Yeah.
It was worth it. I'm just saying that, like, you know, it did take that extra time to live that double life. And also my production was not advancing at the same rate as people who had the time to fully commit to it. Right.
Yeah.
And what happened after grad school, which I'll get to in a moment, is it started really ramping up because of the extra time I had and because my job, which I'll get into now, was related. So I realized, like, in year 3 or so of my PhD, like after I got grilled in my oral exam, which is basically the point of the oral exam, is like, we're going to show you that you're not smart. No, not really. They basically show you like, hey, part of being a scientist, and a big part of being a scientist, is not knowing the answers to things and having to work it out, right? Like, use critical thinking. They basically pick and prod at what you know until they get to a point that you don't know something and watch you try to struggle to figure it out while you're being watched very closely by 5 accomplished scientists, right? So it was a terrible experience.
Sounds
it was
awful.
Awful. It was one of the worst moments of my life. And my boss, my advisor, just totally like dug into me afterwards. Like, this is all the stuff you need to do. Like, you're just, you know, flying by on the surface, and you need to be digging deeper.
Wow.
And, you know, I mean, it was borderline traumatic.
Did you pass? Is that?
Oh, I passed.
Oh, okay.
I passed.
Right.
But I did, you know, realize that, like, you know, and throughout it, the thing is with science is that the best scientists in the world and in history are the ones that get off on not knowing. And what do I mean by that? It's like, when you solve a problem, it's not like, you know, sometimes I used to think like, man, I wish I was just like an architect or like a construction worker, because you build something and you're like, oh my God, look at this building. It is beautiful. We did such a great job. Or maybe you didn't do such a great job, but either way, it's done. You did it. And it's like, cool, we did it. Great. And you can pat yourself on the back. And in science, it's like, oh, cool, we answered question A, and that now opens questions B, C, D, E, F, G, H, etc. So like, you scratch the surface and now you get to dig deeper. And then when you solve that problem, you get to dig even deeper. And I wanted like, just psychologically, like the way my brain works, I wanted to feel proud of something for a moment. And I'm not saying that scientists don't feel proud of their work. They absolutely do. But like, you really have to like love not knowing things. And I realized, like, I wanted to build things. I wanted to be able to take a moment and pat myself on the back and be proud of something that I built, instead of being proud of uncovering all of these things I don't know. Right. And it's just a different mindset. There's not a superior or inferior. We need people who love to solve the unsolvable. Absolutely do.
You know,
but I realized
it's funny because you mention your example as you know, an architect, but the grass isn't always greener, right? Because it's like, I'm going to interview my friend Marcello, who produces as Echo, but he's also architect by day. And you would think, like, okay,
Echo?
Yeah.
I love that guy.
Yeah.
I don't know him personally, but I love his music. Yeah.
And he's actually an architect. And
that's cool.
Over the pandemic, we were talking about it because I had the same like misconception that like, okay, once you're done with the project, you're done with it, right? And he's like, no. You're done with the design, but then you have to go through all the legalese of getting it built. And you have to work with a team who does all the zoning and all the, you know, all the different permits that you have to get for a building, right? So it's like, you know, you think there's this like idea of, when I'm done with something, I'm going to be done with it, right? And the reality is often that's not the case, and so you do have to kind of learn to enjoy the process, right? So, I mean,
absolutely,
the grass isn't always greener.
It's the same. It's the same with making music software, as I later learned. However, I do think there is a difference with science, in the sense that like, you'll never actually know. Like, you just basically, you know, that's what science is. It's like the process of like getting your theories better and better and better, and like having more and more knowledge about something. Like we thought we had it all with Newton, then with gravity, and then Einstein came in and solved gravity, and like et cetera, et cetera. Like you're always just constantly refining and starting to understand the universe better and better. But like
your life's work is constantly unraveling because of someone else who's discovering stuff.
Exactly. And it's a great thing, and I do love it, but I realized it's not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. So I was doing theoretical physics at the time, like computational physics. I had to pick up C++ and like all these programming languages. And I also like throughout all of this, like my love of mathematics was the thing that was driving me more than physics probably, or chemistry. Like it was more, I just loved doing math. And remember, kids, I said math, like as in mathematics, not I love doing meth. I love doing math. So anyway, I was like, okay, well, what else can I do if I don't want to go into academia? What can I do with this skill set? And I was thinking, oh, maybe I could, do music software. That would be kind of cool. Because I'm doing coding, maybe I'll do something like that. And
you're just a glutton for punishment, dude. You just pick like the hardest things that you can do, and you're like, I guess I'll just casually do that. I'll just casually do.
You need a challenge. I mean, but it wasn't casual. I mean, through a series of fortunate events, I got linked up with the head of software engineering at Ableton in Berlin, and I managed to get myself an internship there, where I did that. And my advisor at grad school, like my boss, he allowed me to do it for like a summer. And it was eye-opening. Not only that I was totally unqualified to do it at that point, but also that was the answer. That is what I need to be doing. Like I just loved every second of it, I thought. And I'm eternally grateful to Neil at Ableton. Well, he's not at Ableton anymore, but he was at the time, and for giving me that opportunity, and everyone I met there, and just really fully solidifying like that is what I want to do. And so I got my PhD, which was a big relief, but then I couldn't find a job worth, I mean, like I was teaching music production lessons part-time, and just being poor as hell. And I had a doctorate, I had a PhD. Like, why is it so hard to get a job? I mean, at a certain point I gave up on the idea of making music software, and I just started applying for any software development job ever, because I guess I needed experience in order to get those music jobs. But then I saw that iZotope was hiring in Boston. I was living in Colorado at the time. And I was like, you know what? Let's go for it. Let's see what happens. And thankfully I got that job, which was great, because after 6 months of being basically unemployed and searching for, it was like a blessing in disguise that I didn't get those jobs outside of music, because I ended up working for iZotope. And I actually I finally got another bite too while I was interviewing with iZotope, which was with, but it was with an accounting firm. Doing because I worked with supercomputers a lot during my PhD, and it was running like a supercomputing cluster for them. And they told me straight up in the interview, like, you'll retire by the time you're 40.
Wow.
And so that's a hard choice at the same time being put up with. You can be rich, or you can do what you're passionate about. For better or for worse, I chose what I'm passionate about.
Again,
and
just a glutton for punishment.
It really is, though, man. Like, I mean, a part of it is because my dad, who's a lawyer, well, he was a lawyer. He retired recently. Congratulations, Dad, if you're listening to this. I love you very much. And yay. But he did not like what he did. And he was always preaching to me throughout my life, like, do what you love and you'll be able to find a way to live doing it. Like, you don't want to do something just for the money, because you'll end up, you work for so much of your life, especially here in the US, as like you're almost defined by your job. And it's like, you don't want to waste that, and anyway, he preached this to me a bunch, and it really resonated with me. I didn't understand how expensive Boston was too. And I was not making a lot of money at first. Thankfully, I've gotten promotions etc. And now I'm better. But like,
You deserve it.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it. As you can see from my lovely 1-bedroom apartment. But
our backgrounds are hilarious. It's just like me with the Peloton in the closet.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly. I got my washer dryer right there.
It's the East Coast living, man. It's more expensive.
Yeah, East Coast.
You get 10 by 10. It's
bro. The
it's
East
rough.
Coast is wild. Like, I didn't expect Boston to be like on par with New York. Like, I knew New York was hella expensive.
I mean, I'm in New Jersey, and it's the same. We're like $500 less in rent than Manhattan is, pretty much, which is, you know,
so
absurd.
You're basically Boston.
Yeah,
level,
exactly. It's the same exact thing. Living in the suburbs,
it's ridiculous. It's all going to be underwater in 100 years.
Got to get land in the far northeast right now, and then wait for everything to flood. And then
you're gonna have beachside property.
Exactly. That's my plan.
Yeah. No, that's good, man. That's good. It's good to have a future plan. But yeah, I mean, okay. Basically, I've worked for iZotope now. I got to be the tech lead on Neutron 4 that came out recently. I love my day-to-day. I love my job. It's been a crazy journey. And yeah, just to tie that thread up, you know, it's pretty wild. And I basically, my PhD now just serves to, aside from everything I learned, which mainly was how to think critically and figure things out, it's been mainly just to make jokes. If someone says something ridiculous at a party, I can just be like, "Oh no, that's true. Trust me, I'm a doctor." Or I like stuff like that. It's an endless thing of fun to brag about. Dr. Cory Goldsmith, like it's a dope thing.
Yeah, I'm going to tell my girlfriend to use that, actually, because similar story.
Does she have
where
a PhD?
So she's a doctor of physical therapy. She
nice.
should have been an MD, but she had that same.
Hey, physical therapy is hella important.
Yeah, and she works at Kessler and does spinal cord injury, and it's super interesting and super depressing, and she's incredible. And she also, like, I feel like should have went
Santos' girlfriend.
But my point was going to be, killed it on the Peloton in the background every day.
Yeah.
But I always told her, like, she should have been a medical doctor, because she's one of the smartest people that I've ever met. And her thing was, she really wanted work-life balance, which is, at that level impossible if you're going to be a PhD or MD, and even as a doctor of physical therapy, it's difficult. And so I'm going to tell her to use that at parties. But I think, there's something to be said about, maybe it's the personality type, and it's the driven people in the world who are just attracted to these really high level things, and they're masochists in that sense, where it's like, we're going to sacrifice our social lives,
health.
Our health. we could really get into that, because I did that for a long time, doing the music stuff. I was one of those lucky people who. All right, so you said it took you 6 years to get your PhD. It took me 6 years to get my bachelor's, essentially, because the entire time I was really putting in the work with music. I started to tour a little bit here and there, and I said, I'm gonna prioritize music for a little bit, and I was lucky enough to do that. And again, the same people who are attracted to PhDs or whatever end up being in the music industry, and that is those are the people that you're going up against. But I was lucky enough to do that for a while, and then the pandemic hit, and I actually went the opposite route of like like, let me double down on this music thing. I said I'm going to step away from it for a little bit, and I started working at this is going to be the first time I'm going to like say this publicly, because I haven't really told people as an artist what I'm doing for full-time work. But I started working, my girlfriend's family runs a funeral home in New Jersey. And
wow.
I started working there, just doing like bullshit work as a courier as the pandemic started. And her brother was like, do you want to work on the international shipping team? Which I debated for like a month.
Wait.
Yeah. So we'll get into this.
You can. Yeah, I'm very interested. I didn't know that funeral homes had international.
Most of them don't. And so that's what I was doing as a courier there, was pushing paperwork at like consulates to get person from person X from A to B. And so her brother was like, hey, you've kind of learned here, we need somebody else to do the shipping stuff. And so I've been doing international shipping logistics at a funeral home since for about a year and a half now, full time, which it doesn't sound appealing, but I've actually found it super interesting. And it's actually stepping away from the music industry it gave me a stronger insight as to what I want to do with the music stuff.
That's great.
And it also, I'm very type B as a person. Like I'm super unorganized and very creative in a sense, but I'm not analytical at all. And I'm not organized. And so this job is...
Hey man, you do logistics.
So I learned real quick that I have to kind of like shift my brain. And I even told her brother, I was like, I don't think that's in my skill set. And he's like, well, we'll figure it out, And it's actually kind of changed how I look at things and how I organize myself, how I step into something like I'm starting this podcast and now I'm looking at data and I have spreadsheets already. This is my first episode and I've got spreadsheets. So it's not doing what I'm passionate about for a day job. Like in a sense, it's not music, but it's made me more passionate about about other things, and in a different way that I don't think I would have been had I just doubled down during the pandemic on music, like a lot of my friends did.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to mention this because there's two things I take away from that, or just things that it's kind of like the converse of something I experience, where I work on developing like plugins all day. So I constantly have, iZotope plugins and like Ableton open during the day. And on one hand, you might, if you're a music producer, you sit at home and you're like, oh my God, that's like amazing. You get to like, work on the things that you use as a music producer. You get to have like, plugins up all day and your DAW open. That sounds fantastic. But then you get off at the end of the day and you're like, that's your time to be creative and make music, right? And you're like, God, if I have to see Ableton's UI one more time today, I'm going to kill someone. Like it's like there is this great thing about being able to separate what you love from what you do for work, right? There's also an amazing amount of benefits from it too. Like, don't get me wrong, I love my life, or like my job at least. But like, no, it's great when you can step away from it and have an outsider's view looking in, because it does help you kind of reshift your mind on how you think about things, which is great. I can only imagine that. I mean, that's part of why I recently took a holiday for a long time. After Neutron 4, I was so burnt out and I needed to refocus and actually like enjoy like. I was in a musical rut too, and it helped so much.
I feel like
I found go for it.
Engineers, I feel like especially I know so many software engineers who do music, and I can't like imagine just like staring at a computer screen all day doing like exercising that part of your brain, because engineering by craft is creative, right? So you're not just doing analytical stuff. You are using that like creative side of your brain, and that's got to be super rough to like be like, okay, I just put in 12 hours of engineering work, software engineering, and now I'm going to sit down in front of Ableton. Yeah. And so I totally get it, dude, because like, I don't know what amount of time I would need off after creating a plugin like that, but it would be serious. I'd need like 2 weeks on a beach just to relax my brain, probably.
For me, it was a road trip to Canada.
Nice.
And it was great. I mean, and sometimes it does work in your benefit. Like, you found something cool, like some effect or some sort of automation or something while you were testing some of your code, and you're like, oh, I can't wait to try that when I get off on like something of mine. And it does work sometimes. Sometimes you're just more motivated, but most of the time it's like, okay, I need to like not look at audio or listen to audio for the rest of the day. Yeah, it works like that sometimes, but the amount of, and also in particular with Neutron 4, like that was my first time being a technical lead on a big project. So that's like
massive, dude.
Thanks, man. I mean, I'm really happy with it. It was an awesome time. I had like the best team too, so that really helped. But usually when I'm developing plugins, I have a lot of time to test them and like on my own projects and like participate in the beta more or less. I mean, I'm not actually participating in it. I'm just using them. But this time, because like the overhead of being technical lead, I didn't have as much time as I wanted to actually use it on my own stuff until we were done. And then afterwards, I mean, it just had the moment to be like so freaking proud of us, because it was really incredible to use some of the features I hadn't had as much time with. And just, I already knew how it all worked, but like actually getting to use it was really, really satisfying. And,
can we get into like what is a high level overview of like developing something like that look like? Because like in my head I'm like I'll use the finished product for iZotope products. So I'm like I can't even fathom the amount of work that has gone into this, because they work so well that like they're so detailed, and I can't like what you're the tech lead on this plugin. Where do you even start? Like
brainstorming. I mean, like that's what we're doing for the next project right now, which I won't say what that is because NDAs and all that.
Oh, yeah.
But we're actually in that stage now where we're brainstorming ideas, and usually that's driven by the project manager. If you're in software, you're well aware of who project managers or product owners are, or sorry, product managers. Project manager is a different thing too, but regardless, product managers, they kind of do the research into the field and see like what it is that people want.
Yeah,
or
a lot of customer feedback, I'm sure, goes into that, where they're
exactly.
like, on our last plugin, we got X amount of people requesting this feature, and now we should make a standalone plugin for that, or whatever it might be.
Stuff like that. Yeah, exactly. Or what is it that we're missing that not even people like what are people saying, sort of on a high level, what can we do to solve that problem? Like, here's the problem statement that users are having. How do we create something innovative that will solve that problem for our users? And it's, I used to think of myself as a user, like, because I mean, I use our plugins, I produce, what are my problems? Like, what can I solve? And that's something you have to really get away from quickly. I had one of my colleagues told me at one point, he's like, look, Cory, you use our products, but you are not a user. Like you as soon as you wrote a line of code for us, you were no longer a user, because you have too much knowledge of what's going on. You have to kind of separate yourself from it. That being said, I still heavily like to lean on things that I know myself would love, but that's also just passion and like part of it, and like part of enjoying the job.
It's kind of like music in general, where it's like, if you know what resonates with you, like it should resonate with some amount of the general populace, right? So
yeah, exactly. But anyway, okay, so back to your question, what goes into it? So we start brainstorming, and then we have to try and figure out, how do we solve these problems? What is within our technical capability within the timeline? That's the thing that usually is the most annoying, because there's, pretty much everything is possible when it comes to solving audio problems. But it's how much time do you have to solve it, right? There's deadlines. It's just like the gaming industry, or the gaming industry is like the epitome of toxic timelines. It's really known for like really strict deadlines and really bad crunch time, which is like towards the end. Like, these developers are not like sleeping. I've never worked in the gaming industry. Yeah, but I just hear a lot about that. And when I first joined iZotope, it was a little bit worse than it is now. Now we've gotten a lot better at managing, expectations and timelines and stuff like that.
Should talk to what's his name from 11, who works, I think, for Blizzard now.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't know that.
One
That's
half
cool.
of them, not SNR. Blanking on his name, and if he sees this, he's gonna hate me, because I love that guy. But
they're Nordic, right? Or from
they're from the West Coast. Sky is his other alias. Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I was thinking of the Blizzard.
The Blizzard, yeah. First. No, sorry.
Yeah, not
11,
Blizzard, the gaming
11
company.
With
yeah,
two
11.
V's,
Yeah.
On Ruben Duran's record label.
Yep. That's
and Juna.
West Coast. Yeah.
But he works at Blizzard, and I can't imagine like.
That's sick.
How do you guys balance creating things out? Like, if you work such an intensive job like that, and it's the same thing for you, it's like, how do you even manage to come home and you're like, I'm going to make techno now? Because that, again, glutton for punishment, where it's like, you're not doing something that's easy. That's another art form in itself.
Yeah, it is. And sometimes you just feel more motivated than others. And also sometimes I like specifically have to say like, okay, this Saturday or this Sunday, I'm going to spend making music. And sometimes you stick to it and sometimes you don't. Because as you very well know, from your own experience producing, it's like some days it's just not working.
Yeah.
You know, like, and you can use that time productively still by like maybe sound designing or you know, creating something that could be cool when you're feeling more creative or whatever. But and you know, I try to do that when the ideas that I'm coming up with just aren't sticking. Like it used to be, you would just finish tracks to finish tracks, and now it's like, okay, well, if you're trying to progress with your career, if it's not hitting, like if you're not getting goosebumps from the track you're creating, like it's probably not going to, like, why would a label pick it up
Yeah.
if it's not your best work or like some of your best work?
It's funny. I kind of know, I mean, I don't know how many hours into a project, but it kind of, my best work has been the ones that I've done in like two sessions, where it's like, I
Yep.
know if I'm
100%.
if I'm really grinding on something, it's been like, 2 months, I'm like, I'm trying to make it work. It's like, it's not working. And
It's not going to work.
you kind of learn that from experience, I think. And I'm a little bit too relaxed with it now, where it's like, I don't put in the time with the project because I'm like, I'm trying too hard on this sometimes.
Yeah.
But comes from experience.
I feel like just a small, like, in the terms I feel like if the majority of the track isn't done within those 2 sessions, then it's probably like, if you're not just vibing and feeling it and like you have like that 85 to 90 to 95% of the track, at least the idea, done within like a day or two, it's probably not going to get there. Now, it might take you a month or two to finish that last 10 to 5% because it's like
different ballgame,
all these nitpicky things. Yeah. And you're also sending it out for feedback and people are giving you feedback and you're like, okay, actually that's a pretty good idea. But yeah, it's always that last little bit that takes forever. But if you're not feeling the idea after, the first 1 or 2 sessions with it, like it's almost certainly not going to be a good tune.
Yeah.
Not like it'll be fine, but it won't be good. Yeah. Right.
There's something to be said for like, I think there's an experience you can have where you can finish that track and you can say, it is what it is. It's not my best work. I don't have to release it. There is good experience in taking that like 5 out of 10 project and just being like, I'm going to see it through to the end, even though I know it's not quality, because
it's great experience, a great practice.
But and that's something that I learned over time too, is not everything that you make has to be something that you release. And I think the creator of Rick and Morty, Dan Harmon. Yeah, he has, every time in an interview, they're like, how do you deal with writer's block or whatever? He's like, I just grind through it and make more and more and more and more. And not everything is going to be good, but you get the experience of making more and more and more. And then by the time you've done that 20,000 times, at least like 2 of them are going to be great, whatever it is that you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
So,
and I mean, you're getting,
go ahead. Finishing.
I was just going to say, you're still getting better at mixing. You're getting better at sound design. You're getting better at just using your DAW and your workflow. Like there's so much to gain from working on stuff that you don't release, or just stuff in different genres that you will never try to like actually do well with those genres, but you still make it anyways, just to like unlock that creative juice. And I mean, it's the best hobby in the world, making music. I really, truly believe that. It is the most satisfying and frustrating, but mostly satisfying thing like ever, right? And the more you do of it, the better you're just going to get at it.
I wonder what your experience with music is like, because like for me, I didn't have any musical background whatsoever growing up. I didn't really get into music until I started producing it, essentially because I got into listening to electronic music at like 14, eventually started DJing. And then I was like, well, DJing is easy and I can do that. And I have more to offer. So I got into production. And then I used to be that guy who was like, I don't know, if you didn't make X, Y, and Z, you didn't fit into this thing, then that's like a bad look or whatever, right? So, and then eventually I kind of realized, I'm like, oh, music production is really hard. And even if you make pop music, there's a certain art to that. And it like, dude, I have a newfound respect for people who did, like, if you do hip hop and you make that music, that's incredible to me. And so I wonder, like, you have this huge musical background where what's your experience like with different genres and making different kinds of music, and now you do electronic music? Like, do you have that kind of like techno snobby approach to things, or do you like, I can't imagine that you do, but that a lot of people do, where they're like, oh, if it's not a certain kind of techno, then I hate it and it's the worst thing in the world, essentially.
Yeah. I mean, it's the dude. I could talk the rest of our time about this particular topic. It's very near and dear to my heart, and it's something that I'm constantly struggling with as, like, from branding myself, because I love trance music, not so the modern stuff, except for like progressive. I do like where progressive has gone as of late. But like,
Yeah.
I've always had this melodic side to me, and some of that's from my melodic, like my background with my music education, and it's also just like the emotional side of things that comes from. I mean, it's not, you don't have to have melody to have emotion, but I do love that stuff, and it's really hard sometimes to be able to box yourself in to fit a certain, because no one's going to sign it if it's like, if you write a trance song and call it techno, and you're seeing a lot of that nowadays. I mean, you have this. I mean, me and my friend Stephen Kirkwood, who actually released on Parallels, right, at some point, with Maverick.
Love that guy. His music is incredible.
He's one of the
like,
best
so
out
good.
there in the game. For all of those who are listening there, and if you haven't listened to Stephen Kirkwood, this is going to be my pitch for my boy, who I'm going to see in a few weeks. Actually, I'm going to Scotland, but like, listen to this man's music. Dude. He is on another level, and he is so underrated. But regardless,
plus one. Steven, also one of the most helpful dudes, and like just so much energy, so much creativity. Like, yes, I have so much respect for that guy. And I got the chance to meet him once in I should say Ibiza.
Right? It's
Ibiza. And,
if you want to be super Spanish about
Ibiza.
it. Yeah, Ibiza.
Yeah. So, and I met him in a nightclub real quick, and I was like, wow, the accent, I can't understand you. I was like, I wanted to be like, I love you, dude. You're awesome. I have no idea what you're saying right now, but he's such an incredible producer.
We played Xbox together a lot over the pandemic, and you get used to the Scottish accent. I mean, I me and him are really close, and same with his friend Stephen Galoni, the other Stephen. They're business partners, and both of them are like some of my best friends now. And at a certain point, you do but when they go super Scottish, it doesn't matter how close I am with them, how much I've talked to them. Like, if they want me to not understand them, they can go that extra mile to make sure I don't understand them with like all the patter and stuff. But
maybe one day I'll have them both on the podcast, and people could just watch me struggle.
They have so much to understand, but they can also they know how to tone it down so that people can understand them.
Yeah,
but. Yeah.
When you speak to enough slow Americans, then they're like, we gotta scale this back.
And they watch American TV, all that. They know how to. But regardless, basically what I was getting at is me and Steven have been like just wishing for so long, because we've always kind of loved to sit in this kind of techno trance middle ground realm, and it was always like, oh, this is too trancey for the techno people, or too techno-y for the trance people. And it is kind of aligning right now where and it has been for the last couple of years, where the techno is starting to sound really trancey, and the trance is starting to sound really techy, or so they think sometimes. But regardless, like, and it's the same on the other side too. But it's like the difference is, and you kind of mentioned it, is this techno purism, where if it's labeled as like, there are those people who are be like, okay, this is trance, this isn't techno. People are just calling it techno, and like, I don't even want to give it a chance. And that's, you don't really see that from the trance community. They're just kind of like, cool, yeah, like, I like this. And then you just have techno fans being like, oh, they think they like techno, but they don't like actually know techno. And it's this fun thing. But as a producer, you really have to navigate through that, right? Because if you want a techno label to sign it, you do have to make sure that it's the right amount of tranciness, not like, oh, this is too melodic, or now you have the business techno label. So, you have to kind of try and navigate away from that, or unless that's really like your niche and you want to go for that. But at the end of the day, you just want to make good music, right? So sometimes you let yourself get carried away just for the sake of having more enjoyment in the studio, and you wait until you get that feedback where it's like, okay, man, like this is cool, but like you have like a 1 minute trance breakdown in this is never going to work, you know? And you're like, okay, fair enough. Like I'll save that breakdown for a different project and make this one techno. And that's sometimes when that first or second impression that we were talking about earlier, like you can take the good bits and pieces from a track or take two bits and pieces and make two different tracks. Like it can work. I don't want to say that like you should give up if you're not feeling it after the first session. Like that's 100% not always true. Right. But
Right.
it is a tough like needle to thread, or yeah, that's the phrase. Right. And
yeah. And I think like there's a certain expertise too, because like, I don't know, you see a lot of people who like, they'll copy a certain style of an artist on X label who has done this, who has like kind of threaded that needle and, you know, merged two different styles or different genres. And now they're representative of that style on that label. And then you get people who are like, oh, I'm going to do that and I'll be the next guy on that label. You see this a lot with like Anjuna Beats and Anjuna Deep, where it's like, you know, Yato does this thing and therefore I'm going to be the next Yato, which is not always the right move.
It's never the right move.
Crafted out this unique,
in my opinion.
I mean, it's good to kind of mimic to learn, right? But when it comes to like developing a career, you don't want to be the next Yato, because how much room is there at that table how many seats are there to feed that person, right? It's like there's one Yato and a million people trying to copy him, essentially. And so it's a good way to learn, but maybe not the best route as an artist to be like, I'm going to try to get that.
Yeah. I mean, you want to be the first you. And I mean, like, that's what they always say. But I mean, this is also a difficult problem too, though, because if you stray too far away, I mean, there are people who are so big that they can do whatever they want and they'll get signed, and that's fine. I mean, you've earned it at that point. But it's once again, it's threading that needle. It's like, how much you can you be? Like it used to be for me, my thing was like, oh, I make techno with a trancey twist. Well, sorry, that's not unique anymore. Like, and that's one of the things, like I was saying, when I took this road trip to Canada, like I needed to figure out how I was going to use my taste to be more unique than just like making techno that has melodic aspects to it, because I'm nowhere close to the only person or even like the 100th person doing that right now. It's done, you know, like I missed the mark there, you know, like I didn't peak at the right time. Right. So it's really, but at the same time, it's like I kind of use this analogy sometimes where it's like, if you look at like your iTunes library or Spotify or whatever music like library you have, no one has the same identical music library. Like nobody has exactly the same taste. We're unique in that regard as humans. And therefore everyone has their own unique perspective on music. It's one of the greatest things about music, to be honest. There is overlap, obviously, or else you wouldn't have like fan bases, but sometimes it helps to just listen to some of the stuff that isn't what you make. Like if you know, I used to listen to a lot of hardcore and like indie rock and like emo bands and stuff. And sometimes I'll just take the day to listen to like metal and, or just like old, like stuff I used to cry my eyes out to over, like a girl that broke my heart when I was a teenager or whatever.
You sound like me. My girlfriend makes fun of me because I have a playlist on Spotify called like Feels Good Man and then
That's
Feels
great,
Sad
man.
where it's just all my favorite sad songs. And so one day, you know, I'll take a Sunday where it's like I'll just listen to all of them and kind of remind myself that, how to be sad.
I like that you did Feels Sad Man, because that's way more creative than my playlist, which is just sad. On all lowercase, like there's like I just like, these are my sad songs, and like when I need to feel sad, like this is my go-to playlist for feeling sad.
That's such a like a engineer move, because it's like it's like the metadata tag where it's like what is this genre? It's sad. That is what it is.
Yeah. And like, sometimes you need that. You need that emotional release sometimes. And also you just need to like remind yourself, what are your influences? It's not just dance music. I mean, it might be just dance music, and in which case, like, that's awesome. That means that you are just so active and like just love it. And that's great. But, for some people, it's not always about dance music, and there are other inspirations you can take in and throw into your music. And so if you just one day go into the studio and don't reference anything, don't try to be anything, don't follow any rules, you'll see that you can make unique stuff that no one else would be able to come up with. And it's just about how to make that accessible enough for it to be brandable or marketable or picked up by a label. And that's hard. That's not an easy thing to do.
Super hard. But I think maybe because, man, that's what I'm trying to do now. And since the pandemic happened, I've realized like I used to do a very like cookie cutter niche.
I don't know, man.
That
I've always enjoyed your music. I think it's pretty unique.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And I don't think I fit like in a specific space, but I definitely like recognize that like once I operated within a certain space that I was like setting limitations on myself. And now I'm trying to like listen to more music, like, I don't know, like stuff like Underworld and Orbital, where it's like, okay, this is electronic music, but it's not, yes. I don't think they go into the studio and they're like, yeah, I'm just going to make like four to the floor techno or whatever. It's like, it's very open-ended. And so it's like guys like that and like John Hopkins,
for instance. I love
like,
John Hopkins. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully one day I'll get to interview him. He's a super nice guy. He heard a bootleg of that I did of Lights in the Veins. And he was like, hey, can I use like the arpeggio that you did? And he was like super cool over,
That's
private
awesome.
message, which, but for me, I if he ever sees this, like I can't even tell him how much that meant to me because like he's such an inspiration. He's so incredible. And one of those pioneers who for electronic music, you can't like really pigeonhole him. He just is John Hopkins. And it's like, that's that line that you have to like walk as an artist where how do you get to that level of production skill where you can take any idea that you have and a label will pick it up and it sounds like nothing else except for you. And that's an incredible skill
journey.
And it's a lifelong journey. And I think you could get really distracted from that in the music industry because everybody wants to put their form of whatever it is on you because you start doing a certain thing and the managers will tell you like, oh, well, you got to be on X label to be booked or whatever it is. And everybody's pushing their biases on you, fans included, where they're like, if you're doing trance and you try to do techno and then, you're going to piss off a lot of people.
Fans especially. I could go off on a thing about that, about the trance industry. Maybe we'll get to that in a little bit. I'll let you finish your thought though.
But I think that was probably going to be my next thought. Is like, man, I wish people were more open-minded, which I get why that they are that way, right? And I used to be when I was younger. I used to be like, well, trance is trance. When I was like 17, I was like, uplifting trance is the only trance that there could be. And now I'm old and slow, and I'm like listening to Injuna Deep. I'm like, oh man, trance is just a feeling, bro. Like I start a project and it's like 120 BPM, right? It doesn't matter, and like. I get why people are so attached to a certain thing. They want to be part of something, right? But
and they have memories tied to it, so it means more to them because they have these, I always say that like late 2000s, early 2010s trance was like the heyday, especially with progressive and but I also realized that was like me coming of age as well. So of course I'm kind of tied to it,
That's good for you to realize because I think, you have to kind of step away and realize like, okay, I have like my brain was forming and it formed memories to this certain thing. I feel very much that way about like certain punk rock where it's like, I'll listen to like Newfound Glory and the Ataris
brand
where
new.
I'm like
that will always send me into,
send me into a tailspin for the day where I'm like, this is all I'm going to listen to because my brain just associates certain things with it. And maybe as an artist, you don't really think about that when you're making stuff, but you can kind of like, I can remember gigs where it's like, wow, that was such a special memory. Like Denver for me, when I played a show, it's one of my favorite smaller, like, I played the side room at Beta and it was sold out. Like Adam did a great job promoting it, Adam Stark. And like I came in with no expectation of anything. And I was like, that was one of my favorite nights I've ever played. And it was like such a certain memory that now I like go into shows where I'm like disappointed because it wasn't that awesome. And you can kind of see like how people get so attached to certain things
special
related
though.
To music.
Like, and my heart will always belong there. If it wasn't for that scene, I don't know if I ever would have gotten through grad school. And I don't know if I ever would have been on the trajectory I am now. And I know Adam will be super happy to hear you say that, because he does pour his heart and soul into those sorts of things. Like, even though now he's getting a little bit away from it because of his own success, and that's great.
Yeah.
But you know, it's a special scene. If anyone is listening to this and has not been to Denver and is a music fan, do it. You'll have a great time. There's just so much.
Definitely.
It's like a hidden jewel in the US as far as the music scene is concerned. Makes me happy to hear you say that, because like I said, part of my heart belongs to the Denver scene, and some of my favorite memories are from there as well.
Same here, dude. Like, shout out to the electronic music community, like in Denver, who just have this super special
energy
experience there. Yeah, that happens with certain places where it's like they're kind of, they're not the major metropolitan city on that side, right? But they have this very awesome crew of people who do things, and they bring the right people. And that's also something, like, I'm starting this new like record label. And
congratulations, man. Again. I saw that. I'm so bummed I'm not going to make this New York party, because you also have Collide the Sky playing, and those are my boys.
Yeah.
And Apollo Nash, shout out to them
dudes.
or him as well. Like, that's going to be a cool gig, but I'll be in Europe, unfortunately. But yeah, congratulations, man. I'm really excited about that for you.
Congrats on going to Europe and working cool. Your dream job.
Thanks, man.
Whatever.
No, it's pretty cool.
Yeah. And that's something that I haven't thought about in a long time too, is like, how do I curate that experience for people and like building that community, right? Because like in New York, it's like so high stakes that it's like, it's different kind of like bringing people together. And I think as an artist, it's a worthwhile experience to kind of like throw parties and kind of I'm trying to replicate some of what Adam did in Denver, in New York. How do I make that special? And it's something that you don't think about as an artist, because like sometimes you just get booked for a show and you're like, oh, that was an awesome show. But you don't think like, who put the work in to make this happen? And it's incredible that even happened in the first place. And how do you build that as an artist, and how do I respect that for my performance?
Yeah.
Right?
I just realized early on that was not in my skill set. So like, I haven't, I mean, amongst the, but like, I try to support the people that do those things as much as possible. Like my friend Saad Ayub, who's in Toronto, he's been doing this whole Techno Without Borders sort of show series, and I've gotten to play it a couple of times. Very appreciative of that. But I also have tried to support him as much as I can in any way as far as throwing those events, because he's trying to do it like all around the world. And it's a lot of effort, and I've seen a lot of stress that goes into it for him. And it's just like, there's just a lot of respect into trying to form those communities, and because at the end of the day, you're not really doing it for yourself. Like, yeah, you want to play shows and stuff like that, but it's not about that. It's about like giving people a good, memorable time, and that's not easy to do.
I think, a lot of people don't realize how much effort that can take. And even for me, starting up these new projects, and, I can imagine for everybody else, where it's like, just getting started is daunting, right? And then you're gonna, the first like year that you do anything, and it's the same thing with this podcast, it's the same thing with music, it's the same thing with building like a promotional subscription list for parties or whatever, and you're a promoter. And it's like the first 6 to 12 months are going to be just like, it's a loss. Like but it's that kind of like, it's just like that interest over time that like just multiplies it. Right. So it's like the first 100 people are really difficult to get involved, but 100 to 500, that's actually less of a leap. Mm-hmm. So it's like, because you've learned and you've kind of figured out and you've tweaked, but it's just kind of figuring out, how do I go back and just do it every day and do it consistently and just start and figure out where I'm going to go. That's applicable to just like music, and I'm sure engineering too, where it's like, you don't always, realize what you're saying that you want to do.
It's
right?
Really, yeah. I mean, like with engineering, like especially with making plugins is cool, because like, when Neutron 4 came out, because, like I said, it was a big thing for me because it was my first time as a tech lead and stuff. But I do this with all the products I work on, is where like it gets released and I'm just constantly refreshing YouTube and like Google and trying to see what people are saying about it. And it's also fun being like part of iZotope, because like iZotope has more reach than anything I've ever made like on my own. Right. So it's cool to be like, oh my God, like all these people are talking about something I made. And it's not, it's not like my musical endeavors. Like it always feels cool when, like when I got Cosmic Gate support, for instance, like that was a really cool moment because I've been listening to them for so long. And stuff like that is really cool. But it's like a whole nother level with the plugins because so many people that I look up to are using it and are reviewing it and like all these things. And you realize the impact that you're making with that sort of work. And with science, just going back to that, you're making a large impact without anyone recognizing it. And sometimes you don't even know it until you're dead, like painters or whatever, and I think that maybe it's the part of me, just admittedly, that I want some recognition for things. I think a lot of people are like that. Like we want to know that what we're putting in is having output, and that's that's good, but it's like it's a little bit less thankless, or what is it? Is that the word? Thankless?
I think that's a good way to describe it. And
going back to the architect example, it's like you built that thing, and people are gonna be like, "Wow, what a beautiful building," and you're gonna be like, "Yeah, I know that was."
I'm sure it's kind of the same way with music, but I feel like it's so subjective that it's easy to get discouraged because like you can go in the YouTube comment section and there's that one guy who's like, this is bullshit. And you're like, that's going to stick with me more than all the comments that are like good. Whereas like, I think, for iZotope or engineering, there's more, there's a little bit more reward maybe in that sense.
You'd be surprised. I mean, how many people want everything to be free they're like, oh my God, they barely did anything with this new version. Why do I have to pay for it? It's like, bruh, I've been working my ass off for the last several months, and you're telling me that like we barely did anything? Like, come on. But
yeah, and I think people also just don't understand the level of work that goes into anything. No. It's like
same with music.
When everything is on demand now, everything where it's like something, will break in my bathroom. I'm like, I'll just go on this app and get a plumber today and like, he'll fix it. And I don't think about like, that guy has been working that job forever. He went to school. He's been working his ass off, and you don't respect the level of artistry that's gone into anything anymore because everything is just so easy to get.
I completely agree.
And it's kind of a shame because it can discourage people from continuing to do anything, whatever it is, when you don't see that reward and you see like these negative comments. Like that's the difference between like you continuing down this path or you just being like, well, fuck it.
No one
like,
cares. So why?
Yeah. Which happens. I don't know about you, but with the music stuff for me, it's like every 6 months I'm in a period of, fuck it. Nobody cares.
I think every music producer ever goes through that. Like, why am I even doing it? Like, the thing for me, I think, is going to grad school and like that moment in my PhD where it's like, oh, wow, like I really can't not make music. Like this is something I just have to do. And I think that's kind of what I focus on sometimes, where it's like, even if no one ever listens to anything I make, I'm going to be doing it until I'm dead. Like because I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm doing it for me more than anything else, because like I would not be able to live without, like I said, it's the greatest hobby in the world. If I wasn't able to do it, my life would be worse. And as much as it sucks sometimes, like seeing, like we talked about like producer envy earlier. It's like, I see someone on this stage. It's like, that should be me. Like, why isn't it me? And everyone goes through that, and it's hard, but you can come out from that by just like focusing on yourself, competing with yourself, being better than you were the day before, and just trying to do that. And that's how you can, find some ounce of satisfaction. It's like, you
have to enjoy the process, and you have to find the love
not the
for
destination,
that. And I wonder if that's like something that happens maybe as you get more successful, where more of your work is like tied to this like financial security that might be found from like gigging or whatever, where it's like you become less separated from everything becomes tied into the creative process, where it's like, now it's not just me creating music. It's now I might be able to make a living, and these other people are taking that away from me or whatever. It's like, and what you don't realize is it's not a zero-sum game, right? It's like, it's very much internal. Everything is internal. The competition is always internal, and having those external things kind of gets in the way of that.
Oh yeah.
And it's wild because like, even for me, like I've played some really big festivals and like performed at some of my favorite venues, and like even once in a while I'll still see something where I'm like, why is that not me? And it's what you don't realize is like, if you miss one train, there's a next train coming in 10 fucking minutes. It doesn't really matter. And you just have to carve that space out for yourself over time. But the human brain is just so attached to, just this idea of like, well, that like maybe it's a survival instinct even.
I think it is.
Where it's like, yeah, where it's like you see someone else getting something, you're like, is there enough food on my plate where I'm not going to be jealous about that? And that's something I try to remind myself of constantly. Like, just make sure I have enough to eat and make sure I can feed my friends where I can. And then beyond that, everything else it's nonsense. It doesn't matter.
I think that's such an important point, because I've seen people go down, like some of my closest friends I've seen go down this road where they're like, I feel this way and I feel like I shouldn't feel this way, and it's making me feel even worse because I'm like, man, like this whole example we're saying where it's like, man, it should be me on this stage. Oh, but why do I feel that way? I'm such an asshole. Like, why can't I just be happy for other people doing what they're doing and just be okay with myself? But it's okay. I think it is a human reaction, because at the end of the day, natural selection is always at play. And sorry, anti-evolution people, like it is. But it's always survival of the fittest. I mean, that's it. So you're going to have these reactions, this competitive kind of nature where you want to be able to survive, to pass on your genes or whatever. It is maybe selfish by definition, but it's also just who we are. And if you're not hurting anyone with it, then I'd say that's okay. Just don't hurt yourself with it. Don't let yourself get down just because you want more from yourself. That's totally fine. You should always be trying to be better. And it is, like I was saying before, like it is the journey, not the destination, because once you get there, what's next? Like you can't just have like one goal for yourself and be like, oh, okay, like if you're, I played Awakenings, that means I'm a great techno artist. And now, what do I do next? That was my goal. I
could talk about this at length, because like I felt that way about some of the gigs that I've played, where it was like, oh man, once I do that, that must mean that like I'm secure and that's it. I'm doing things right, and that's maybe it. And then you get there and it's like it passes you like that, and it never goes like you think it's gonna go. It's always a fucking dumpster fire logistically, and it's never as fulfilling as you think it's going to be. You're like, oh, like my friends are always telling me like, oh, you played Tomorrowland, like one of the biggest festivals, and that must have been amazing. And it was amazing, but it was nothing like they think it is for me in my head, where it's like you went there and you were a fucking rock star and it was the best experience ever. It was like, no, it's stressful. It's financially like, it's not as rewarding as it looks like on the flyer, where it's like the guy at the top of the flyer is making $1 million, but the little guys in the side room are just making it there pretty much. And it's like, it's never what you think it's going to be. Yeah. Or losing money. Yeah. And it is what it is. Right. But I think everything is just so grand that you're doing in the music industry that it's like, you're kind of delusional about like what success is, because you think it's like, okay, playing this gig is going to be amazing and that's the end game, but it's not. The end game is sustaining a career over time, no matter what you get out of it. It's to be able to show up to the game every day for the rest of your career as an artist. And you don't realize that when you're getting into it, because you're like, if I release on X label, I'll do this and I'll be set. And that's not the case at all. And it's kind of shocking, actually, maybe for a lot of artists, for myself, that there is no end game. There is no final step that you take. You're just going to do this.
Yeah. I mean, I think one way of looking at it is like, if you could tell yourself 5 years ago that you are where you are today, would yourself 5 years ago have been like, yes, that is awesome, And you wouldn't feel like that right now. You'd be like, well, I only got like so and so amount of Spotify plays, and like that means I suck. And it's like, bro, like 10 years ago, how many Spotify plays did you have? Was it 0?
Yeah.
Like, because anything is better than that. I think there was a while where I had like 0 monthly listeners on Spotify, and like And then when it goes up to 1, you're like, cool, mom listened to my track today, like, or I
Number
listened
one
to
fan.
it. Yeah, exactly.
Number one fan.
Yeah, and I think exactly. I mean, well, of course, that's great. Shout out, mom. But it's like, it's just, I keep on saying this, but just constantly bettering yourself. I mean, that's it right there. It's like, are you making friends and memories and all this stuff? Like, I literally, like, the best moments of my life, like overwhelmingly would not have happened without music. And regardless of how successful I am, which I'm still not satisfied with myself musically, which is fine. I think everyone is, but all of the things that have happened and the great people I've met, what we're doing right now, like, this would not have happened if I had not gone down this path. And for that, you have to be thankful. I mean, that is what the journey is all about right there. I mean,
It's so true.
yeah, it's an incredible thing when you take the moment to reflect and look back on it, not where you are, like, and where you're going, I guess.
It's so true. And I feel like, maybe the brain does have that evolutionary portion of you that you have to kind of like shut off, where you just have to look at point A and point B and everything that happened in between. And maybe that's like a framing thing where, you could kind of look, and maybe if you look at things in a way where it's like, okay, I didn't get this gig or whatever, but like, why didn't I get that gig? Instead of saying like, well, fuck, that should have been me.
Yep.
It's like, there's a reason why, probably, right? Like maybe your reach dropped, or maybe that promoter just likes a different sound or whatever. And maybe, learning to appreciate the little things along the way while just kind of changing how you critique yourself is probably a recipe for like dealing with the negative sides of these things over time, where it could really drag you down if you look at everything like, I deserve this and I didn't get it. And that's another thing too, is this is the hardest thing ever. Some of the things that we've mentioned, like being a creator in general, no matter what you're doing, you have to be able to just kind of withstand relentless feedback from the world over and over and over and over and over and over and over until you die, essentially. Like, that's just never going to end. So I don't know why we have this dumb thought in our head where like, I deserve something or whatever. It's like, no, it doesn't owe you anything. And you just have to kind of just be able to show up to the game every day.
Yeah. No one owes you anything. That's such just like a true statement. The world doesn't owe you anything. And the quicker that you accept that, you have to take things. Like, there are some things that are given in life. Like, if you just happen, like the genetic lottery, if you were born to a super rich family, like, great, congratulations. Like, you have a pretty easy go at life most of the time. But, for the most part, for the rest of us plebes, like, you have to take a lot of things, and if you don't put the work in, it's not going to happen. And even if you do put in the work, it's not going to happen sometimes, like it's like, that's just how unfair this thing that we call life is. But there are things you can do to improve your odds. Right. And it's exactly like you were saying, like, if you're not reflective about it, like what we do in software engineering is, you have, like, anyone who works agile, as it's called, will know about retrospectives. And that is what it's all about, is looking back, what went wrong and why did it go wrong? How could it have been better? And how do we use that to improve our function as a team? And, that's a really depressing, but also healthy exercise to do. Because it's not always depressing. Sometimes it's really insightful, but it's like, it's exactly like you were saying, why didn't I get this gig? And sometimes the unfortunate answer is, sometimes it's like, oh, you don't have enough followers on Instagram. Like, that is the one that really drives me crazy. And I'm not saying that that's always the case or even usually the case, but there is no denying that social media popularity can help you. And now it's like, it's such a big thing, and you see people making it because they're TikTok stars. And it's like,
that kills me.
It kills me too, because I don't have that skill set. And at this point, I don't know if I'm young enough to learn that skill set to a full extent.
Yeah.
Like, maybe if we had publicists or something like that, that helps. But like, at the end of the day, with social media and content, like, you got to do a lot of that yourself. And if you're not good at marketing, Like, that's just an unfortunate truth, that it's like, it's not, it's something you have to kind of at least learn a little bit of, is how to
Yeah.
engage with your fans and get new fans and stuff, and post stories, and yeah.
It's something that I'm currently working on, because I always have like this thing that like, I feel like social media is inherently narcissistic, right? Where it's like, I hate posting about music stuff because I feel weird posting about it. I
Hmm.
feel like it's douchey. I'm like, and then I realize, like, especially like going back to the topic of like throwing shows, like how important it is that my audience is engaged, because I have to sell tickets
Hmm.
and I have to get people to come to shows. And if a promoter is taking a risk on me, that is a bridge that I could burn potentially by not doing well promoting the show. And so it is a skill set that you do have to learn. And it's a skill. It's got to be like anything else, right? That like, if you're a music producer, you didn't just start producing music day one. You sat there in front of a DAW and you figured it
Yep.
out. And it's the same thing with everything else, is that, you have to sit down with social media and building email lists and text lists, and you're going to flounder day one. And it's something that I have to remind myself of, because I'm doing all these things, running a record label, like starting this podcast, and doing my own music. And I haven't really taken that seriously over time. I've just kind of figured the people who are looking for me will find me. But your competition is
Yep.
everything in the world, so I do have to get better at presenting and marketing and branding. And I'm even learning ad systems and
Yep.
stuff, because it's like, I want control of my brand. I don't want to have to pay somebody to do any of these things until I'm able to like feed them,
Yep.
essentially, and I could give them a salary that it makes sense for them to do. So, these are just things that I have to learn how to do. And it's like anything else, is that I'm going to suck at it day one. And it's going to be embarrassing. I'm sure I'm going to post something from this podcast and be like, I'm going to look at it in 5 years and be like, fuck, I wish I didn't, or I wish I said that different. But that's what makes us good, I think, too, at anything that's creative, is being able to take that framework in the end and say, how could this be better? And the agile thing is something that you don't think would be applicable to anything creative or anything, but being able to look back at something and say, like, why didn't it work? That works for everything. And that's incredibly useful as a skill.
Yeah, I mean, even just, and I'm sorry for outing Adam Stark a little bit here, but he actually does have like kind of a Kanban board sort of thing in his studio, that he like will on a whiteboard just like kind of plan out things like that and use like a very agile mindset. And it's something I'm very envious of, because I can't do that without like a company around me. And like, I think that approach to social media also works too. And it's exactly like you said, like, you are going to post things that you cringe watching back, but if you're not trying and failing and learning from those mistakes, like, no one's going to watch that stuff,
Yeah.
and like, just like post a story and tag someone that, like, if you go to a show, like, just tag the artist that you're seeing. I mean, they might actually see your Instagram because they're looking through their stories, and like, give it a repost or a share. And then maybe you gain one fan, and that's already something that you wouldn't have gotten if you hadn't done it. And yeah, sometimes there's going to be some cringe content. We're human. Like, we can't be perfect. And, it's, I just hate, I'm like you, I hate having to promote myself like that, and just like post random stuff where you're like, oh, I have to be funny here. How can I be funny? And usually when you're thinking about how you can be funny, if you're not a comedian,
you're not going to be
you're not
funny.
going to be funny, like, it's usually the organic things that end up being funny. And so it's like getting into the rhythm of posting like organic stuff, because you're promoting your brand as a human being. It's just, I hate it in so many ways, but I do know how necessary it is. And the people who are good at it are really good at it, and that is a skill within itself. And there's no disrespect I'm giving to those people, but like, it does give you an advantage, and it's one that I don't think I will ever really have. But I don't know. I mean,
Well,
my social media has been on the up. So maybe I'm doing something
you
right.
also have done some of the most difficult things it is to do as a human being. You have a fucking PhD, and then
Thanks,
you're
man.
like, there's no way I'll figure out social media. It's not rocket science. Like, why do we feel like this? It is a different skill, but you're personable. I'm sure, you know, if you approach social media like you did this podcast, like you're going to be great at it. It's just like we're flowing, and it's like, why do we find this so difficult? I came into this podcast and I'm like, I'm gonna flounder at this, and it's like it's going like pretty decently for the first podcast recording, right?
We're having a great conversation.
So,
yeah.
I don't know why our brains are so like, and I think that is actually why we are good, eventually become good at things, right? Because we're able to say, I really suck at this, and but now if I really want to do it, I'm gonna get better. And so
why is it that, like, I mean, and you just kind of explained it, but you know, it is those sorts of self-doubt. It happens a lot in creatives and like intellectuals, and there's a lot of overlap in those two categories. But like, you know, we were talking about it. I don't know if we were talking about this before we started recording or when we started recording, but like, you know, people who watch a YouTube video and think that they know more than scientists. Or they just think there's something corrupt going on, and this information, this YouTube video, without verifying it with any, you know, peer-reviewed sources or whatever, and this all of a sudden, like, they're convinced that the Earth is flat. And you know, just to pick like the most extreme example,
that's a great example.
Yeah, and it's like, where is that self-doubt, that sort of like questioning of, you know, am I really the one qualified to be making this sort of judgment, or is there something I could do to better myself that would make me understand something better? And I'm not saying that you have to trust everyone and everything. I'm absolutely not saying that. Like, you should question things, and that's something that conspiracy theorists, and I love a good conspiracy theory. I won't go off too far on that realm, but like, you know, well, don't you want us to be questioning things? Like, isn't that what science is all about? Absolutely it is. But like, there are rules to that questioning, you know, like there's the scientific method for a reason, you know, like there's ways of verifying information. There are ways of self-criticizing that can be healthy, too, on the same like realm. And it's just interesting that you can tell a lot about a person in terms of how they are trying to better themselves. And that's not mutually exclusive. I'm not saying like, if you love your conspiracies and things like that, like, no shame on you. I mean, if you're a flat earther, a little bit of shame on you.
Yeah, a little questionable, but like, questioning things is good.
Questioning,
for sure.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's some level of truth to all those things. And I think that's the problem with like conspiracy things, is that it's like there's probably 10% that's accurate, and then like 90% is just emotional nonsense thrown on top of it, pitching you on it. And that's everything in the world, is just like, once you find an emotional attachment, you're like so clouded.
Yeah.
And that's why scientists are able to just like be like, well, you know, it's the scientific method shows you exactly how wrong you are exactly every time. So it's like you develop this skin. Yeah, well, or within the level of knowledge that we have available to us now, right?
Right. I mean, it's like what I was kind of saying way back when. Also, I don't remember if we were recording when I said this, but the problem I have with those sorts of things is that there are legitimate problems with the scientific community.
Oh, of course.
And they're not being addressed because people keep on pointing at the things that we've already figured out. Like, you know, like it's like scientists, and I just want to put this out publicly, just as someone who's seen it firsthand. Scientists are very like spiteful almost, because it's like they're constantly competing with ideas and they're married to their own research. And so it's like, if someone says something that's like pretty groundbreaking, you've got so many people trying to prove them wrong. And if they can't prove them wrong, they're going to be like, fuck, you know, like, I guess they're right. I hate it, but they're right, because they can't publish anything that shows that this other person is wrong. So if you have an overwhelming majority of scientists agreeing on something, that means they are begrudgingly agreeing. Like, they couldn't disprove this other person, so they're like, okay, yeah, like, they're right, we couldn't disprove it. So like, if you see like 90% of scientists agree on this one thing, you shouldn't be trusting the 10%. Like, they might have their own reasons for not, I forget the word, but like agreeing more or less. But like, you know, that's actually one of the things that is, you know, in my opinion, very like surprisingly good about the scientific community is that they want to disprove people so much. If someone could have disproved evolution or man-made climate change at this point, they would have, because they would have gotten a Nobel Prize. If you disprove Darwin, you are like the best biologist of all time, like hands down.
There's something to be said for being like that 1% who's contrarian and is actually right, where it's like you just blew the lid off and maybe that's probably an ego thing too, which is why you see some of these like guys who go really off the deep end on the science stuff, where it's like, you know, it's probably easy to get caught up, and you see it with politics too, where it's like, you know, your favorite public figure who is like involved in certain politics ends up just like doubling down repeatedly because they're just going against the grain, and now they make a living going against the grain, and now they're stuck in this like loop where it's like they make Instagram ad money because they're a certain part of the political spectrum.
Yeah. And
so it could be problematic. And I wish it's with politics and science and like healthcare, none of it should be tied to money, but it is, unfortunately. And I'm sure that's one of the like leading issues in the scientific community, because it is the issue with everything else, is that everything is tied to profits. So it's like, inevitably it kind of fucks up the system, where it's like I shouldn't say nobody, not everybody's a scientist because they just want to be a scientist, but like everybody then makes a living from it.
Yeah.
And so you have 50% or maybe more of scientists who are just like, I just need a job and I'm just doing it. And they're not doing it for the fundamental, you know, I just want to change the world and discover stuff about science. Like some of them are in it because of the money.
I mean, if they're in it for the money, that they did a really poor choice, because like can't
it's
make
a high level thing.
Yeah. If you do industrial science, then sure, you can make a decent amount of money off it. But academia, the main part, like our academic institutions all over the world, like not just in the US, like, I mean, I would argue they're very underpaid. I mean, they're going through it because
I think that's the problem, though, is that most of the people aren't paid well. And now they're tied to their living that they don't make enough money in. And now their livelihood is based on them keeping that job. And you
being
can't go
able
on
to
Twitter.
get grant money.
Yeah. And then you
but
can't
no one's
go on
going to
Twitter.
give you a grant if you're constantly disproved for doing bad science. So
that's true.
It's like there are some things within science that, they are tied to money, but at the same time, like if they get embarrassed, they won't have that money anymore. So they have to do good work.
Right.
And that's why it's very unique in that sense, because like I was saying, the scientific community wants to disprove you if their research goes against yours.
Yeah. In an ideal world for me, I feel like we should just subsidize fucking science, and everybody who does it should just be paid well. And we should never have to think about like, how do I get grant money or whatever? And like, that's another issue with grants too, is like, your science has to prove a certain thing, and a certain company is maybe backing that and they're paying for it, or a certain, you know, so
it doesn't
I don't know.
have to. Yeah, this is something that I maybe I won't bore people with talking about grants, but you don't have you set out you basically, I've had to write a grant application before and it's awful, but like you basically go out on what you're trying to find and what evidence you have, because the people who review these grant proposals, like they're scientists as well, like they know exactly what's going on, so you can't really bullshit them. But you'll be like, this is the evidence we've gained so far that we think that this sort of research will come out with this result, and sometimes it doesn't, and the grant givers are giving you money regardless, so it's like, sorry, like we were wrong. And that's science, you know, like it's like we set out with a hypothesis, our hypothesis was wrong. And that was the worst part as a grad student, by the way, or just doing science in general, where you spent like 6 months trying to get like to something. And sometimes that answer might not even exist. Like, it's like, oh crap, now we got to go back to the drawing board. I hate my life, you know, like it's rough. That's another thing about science versus engineering, is with engineering, it's like usually there is a way to build the thing. And if you don't, then you build something different that has a similar result. Whereas science, it's like you might not even get an answer, let alone the answer that you want. And then you gotta like, you know, go back and figure out what actually is going on, or what questions can you answer. It's a crazy field. I have just so much respect for people who do that for their entire lives.
I wish everybody could kind of go through that experience and experience that, because that happens in creative fields as well, right? Where it's like you get to the end product or the end, the end result of all your work, and you realize, shit, this is this is not what I wanted, or it's completely different, or I did this wrong. And like you get up to the top of the mountain and you realize that the mountain you actually wanted to be climbing is 3 times the size, and you have to go all the way down yours to get there. So you have to start all the way from the bottom. And I think that's like such a useful experience as a human, actually, even though it's probably like, especially in that regard, like for science, where it's like you do all this research and you do this study, and then the end result is like, well, we were way fucking off. That's got to be the worst feeling.
It's awful, man. It's so bad. And that's what I'm saying. Like the best scientists are the ones who get off on that. They're like, well, great. Now we know it's not this. It's like, cool, man. But you just like spent like so long, I don't know. But you're so right with it. It does give you this kind of outlook with creative endeavors. And like, sometimes you'll finish an EP and you're like, I was going for so-and-so record label. And then you start listening to like their recent releases and you're just like, oh, there's no way they're going to sign this. This EP is like not what they're releasing right now. I thought it was when I set out. Now, I mean, and you can use reference tracks and whatever to kind of minimize that risk, but I mean, it still happens. And it's like you were also saying, like if you try to sound like someone, they're not. I mean, it goes back to again Stephen Kirkwood. Like everyone wants to be on Anjuna in that space because they're like a cult, and they have like this really loyal group of fans and followers. And even if you're not a current Anjuna fan, you probably used to be, like when, if you're like a pure trance person, like you'd listen to Anjuna at some point. Like, come on, be real. We all grew up
at one point in our lives, just played the Ocean Lab
albums and cried our eyes out,
Exactly.
So like, and Steven goes and releases like a techno track on Anjuna. He wasn't trying to sound like Anjuna. In fact, Alan Fitzpatrick played when it was a work in progress. I think Gaslighter is the name of the tune. And that was like his door being open to release music with Anjuna, and he did it by making like a track I never would have imagined that Anjuna would sign. And it just goes to show you, like, if Anjuna is the record label you're going for, like, yeah, you'll probably want to have some aspect of their sound in it, but you never know how far you can get by just being yourself and being innovative and new. And then sometimes, you'll get in those situations like we were talking about, where you set out to do one thing and then you realized, oh, well, that wasn't it at all. And now it's time to go back to the drawing board. But at least you learned something,
I wonder if, like we were saying before, like why does the brain do this negative emotion thing? But maybe it's doing that on some small scale where it's like it's getting to that end result of like, I'm doing the wrong thing and I have to figure out and correct, or maybe go back to the beginning. And so maybe our brain is just wired that way on a smaller scale, so that we don't have to go through that whole
scale. No.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like, I don't know, it's astounding because even the most talented creatives that I know are they're still like me in that regard, where they're like, I've talked to some of my favorite producers of trance, and that, like, I've had discussions with them and I've been like, do you ever get to a point where you're just like proud of your work and you're like, you've written this legendary piece of music? And they're like, no, my shit sucks.
Yep.
Like, and it's like, wow, if this guy's written the best piece of music I know, like, and he still feels that way, our brain just must do that. Maybe it's just always
trying to be better.
Yeah.
But it is weird. We're always more critical of our own things. That's when you know that someone's really an asshole, is if they like just think that they're the best ever. It's like, really? Like, like, are you serious? Because like, no, I mean, even if we think that, it's like when someone thinks that about themselves, it's like, oh, you really just don't have that trigger in your brain that is like, I need to be better.
It's also like, I feel like the most talented guys that I've ever met are like, they're that critical that it's like, that worries me. If somebody is coming into this industry, they're making music and they don't have that trigger, then I'm either concerned that they don't make their own music or something,
right,
or they're missing that, and that's going to impact their career. because you can't, it's the most humbling thing in the world to put yourself out there like this. And you're going to get cut down real quick. If you think you're the shit, you're really not. You're surrounded by the most talented people, the most like people with the most resources, and all the fans are used to that. They're every legendary song has ever been made already, and you're coming into this fresh and you think you're the shit. Good luck.
100%. I mean, at the same time, it is good to be able to recognize your accomplashments and be proud of something. Sure. Of course, I don't think either of us is saying that, but like, you're not the best and you never will be. Like, I mean, even when you get to like the ones who are considered the GOATs, right? Like, I mean, you have to believe, like, to get to that. I mean, I don't know, like LeBron James and like Michael Jordan, they always had to believe that they were the best and like to compete at that level, which is fine. But at the end of the day, like, it's not like they didn't think that they could improve, you know, like it's always that. And also just, it's always debatable who the greatest is. So like, even if you think you're the greatest, you're not. Like, people will see it as different. There's just no point in thinking that you're the shit ever. I mean, you can be proud, but don't think that you're better than everyone else. That's just like a superiority complex, in my opinion. But
I think it's kind of like apples and oranges, where it's like, you know, at a certain level in professional athleticism, it's like it's dependent on you knowing that you are the greatest. Like, if you're Mike Tyson, you're not going to go into the ring and be like, I could be better at this.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
Your survivival depends on you knowing full well that you're going to kill this guy.
Yeah, maybe athletics is a little bit different.
Yeah, but I think a lot of people do. They're the types of, it makes sense that they're the types of people that would be competitive in that aspect. But I think it's a bad recipe, especially if you're a new artist. Some of the best advice like that I've ever gotten has been like, just be humble, be easy to work with. And like, that'll pay off more over time than being that guy who's like comes in and they're like, I'm the shit. Now there is like the converse to that, where it's like, if there's that great joke that Dave Chappelle does of like, he meets Kanye West and Kanye West just this is before he's famous. He just knows he's going to be famous.
Yeah.
But I mean, you know, is that is that an issue, like a mental health issue that like, you know, he's just missing that thing, or did he really just know and he's that confident? And it's like, you know, not everybody's Kanye West. So how many people could get away with that? I'd be careful to be that guy who thinks he's the shit. But, you know, it's
definitely a fine line, because I'm dope and I do dope shit.
That's the line.
Is that the line?
That's the line. Yeah. I'm like, it makes sense though that he becomes the like one of the biggest artists in the world, because like maybe he just knew. But I think for most people, you know, you're not going to be that top 0.001% in whatever you do. I mean, if you are, that's amazing. But
it's like we've been saying, like, there's exceptions to everything we're talking about, and I think there is something to be said about having that sort of confidence. Like, it can get you far, for sure. But you have to have the stuff to back it up, and in Kanye's case, he did. Right. Yeah. Or in Mike Tyson's case, I mean, he bit an ear off, but other than that, like, you know, he did.
I guess maybe it's like a natural, because I can't ever see myself being like that, maybe. But
yeah, maybe it's just a personality type.
But also maybe if you're Mike Tyson, like, he was probably born and he just kind of fucking like knew when he got in the ring that he was incredible at this, and that was his thing, right? So it's like maybe there's a difference, because maybe you or I haven't experienced that, where you're Kanye West and he's like, I just fucking know I'm the shit. It's like, I've never felt like that. So maybe that's why we're a little bit different.
It also could be, you know, experience too. Like I was talking about at the very beginning about how grad school, you come in like, I'm going to be a great scientist, and then you just immediately get shut down. And it's like, maybe when you have those experiences, you know, okay, yeah, I'm not a gift from God. There is something to, I mean, Kanye like fully believes he's a gift from God, right? Like it's like, you gotta.
I've met so many people in the music industry who think like Kanye, but don't have the same product, and it's like, I don't know how well that's gonna go for you. But.
Yeah, the only reason we know about Kanye's case is because he's Kanye and he succeeded in that way, right? But most of the people who think like that don't have that fame to back it up. We just see the ones who did have the product to back it up because they got there and we know about them, right? Yeah. And I think you're right that probably most people don't most artists probably well, I don't know. I don't have the statistics, but it's definitely just a difference in experience and maybe genetics and personality type. But I mean,
Yeah.
I don't care who you are. You can always be better.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I think also realizing, like, even if you are that person, like realizing that you were born into a very specific,
Yeah.
time, place, and you have certain genetics and you're born into an area that like you're able to do this or whatever. It's like being realistic about where you are, where you come from. Anybody could do that. And it's like,
So much of it is luck.
yeah. Yeah. A lot of people don't realize that either. Like we're very lucky, like to even have the technology to
Mhm.
make music in the first place. Right. And it's like, a lot of people go through the motions and they don't have the respect for either where music came from or like where they came from. And these are all things that take a little bit of introspection. And I don't know about you, but I like over the pandemic, especially, I got really into like meditation and like Stoic philosophy and stuff. And I feel like it's kind of changed my perspective on life in a way. So like for me, it's like I'm always looking for things that are synergistic and kind of better myself, no matter what it is. It's not just music, but it's like living in general. And I feel like you're probably the same way, right? Where it's like you have a PhD, you do engineering, you work on music, and maybe that's just a personality type where
I have this problem where I take very good care of the things I work on. I don't take as good of care of myself, and that is a struggle. I when it's like an aspiration or something that I'm working on, like whether it be a plugin, a piece of music, my PhD thesis, whatever, like I basically put my health at risk to better that. And that's something I recognize and something I'm trying to work on. And one thing I started doing though during the pandemic was breathing exercises, and that helped just
yes.
so much. Um,
Oh man, I'm glad that you brought this up because I could go on at length about this. We're already like an hour and 45 minutes into this conversation, but I don't know. I'd really
let's
like to
do it.
talk about
Let's do
this
it. Yeah.
too because I think I think it's really helpful for artists because I was you for a long time. I would burn the candle at both ends and I would let my health go essentially, and I'd sacrifice everything to
Mm-hmm.
do music and whatever was related to that, and it really took a toll on me mentally and physically, and that was especially apparent like over the pandemic where it was like I had then as that was starting I just like kind of I saw shows go up in flames
Mm-hmm.
essentially, and I was like I have no idea where money is going to come from, and so it became really stressful, and I realized I sacrificed my health and my mental well-being for a very long time for I wouldn't say no reason, but I was not as careful as I am now, which if I could go back, I think it would have been better that I did
Mm-hmm.
take care of myself because I could do things better. And so I feel like there's a balance there between like sacrifice and, setting yourself up in a way that you can sustain a career or whatever you're doing over time. And that's funny that you mentioned breathing exercises because like I was going through like severe anxiety and depression, and breathing exercises for me along with meditation and just exercising in general became like a very important thing that helped me kind of deal with that. And it's funny because I've always had depression and anxiety my entire life. And I always wrote those things off. I was like, well, there's no way like just sitting down and breathing will really fix my chronic anxiety. That sounds fucking ridiculous. And then when you look at it, it actually makes the most sense. It's your body does it every day, right? Like you do it without thinking. And when you get into anxious thought patterns, your breathing patterns
Yep.
change. So that at the source is
Yep.
going to help. And I don't know what it is that I wrote it off, but I'm so glad that I picked it up eventually because like it's instrumental for me to be able to do anything in life anymore, to be able to recognize that
Mm-hmm.
I have anxiety and then I have a trigger and then I have a solution for it that I can sit down,
Yep.
meditate, do breathing exercises. And so what does that look like for you? Like, cause I could get into my stuff as well. And like, so what do you do like for
Yeah,
breathing
mainly like Wim
exercises, for
Hof
example?
type stuff,
Yeah.
which is really good. And then,
Yeah.
as a tribute to your background, I do some Peloton as well for like regular exercise. Although I've fallen off a little bit. Like I'm a travel addict.
Nice.
My mom was a flight attendant for like 40 years
Yeah.
or something like that. Sorry, mom, if you're listening to this and I got that wrong. She was a flight attendant for a really long time, and I got that gene as far as just loving travel. And thankfully, because she had that career, it allows me to travel fairly cheap. And also because of the pandemic, I can work remote now, which is just huge. And because iZotope, we are sister companies with like Native Instruments based in Berlin, so no one has a problem with me working from Europe or whatever. I can just go. And traveling is such a huge like mental health thing for me, just to like remove myself from this apartment and like breathe in beautiful places, and like do these breathing exercises and things like that. It kind of takes away from like my physical exercise a little bit because I don't have like a Peloton or something like that, but you can still exercise. It's just about being like disciplined with it. I got this Apple Watch recently and that's helping a little bit too. Or just dancing. Like I went to this awesome event yesterday called Infrastructure. There's this techno collective in Boston called Infra. Shouts to those guys because they do an amazing job. And like it was just like 140 BPM, like hard techno. And I must have burnt, or according to my watch, I burnt 1,500 calories doing that. And I felt so much better. Like it's just, we as humans we're made to like move and not just sit around all day. And it's and diet is important too. And I don't do enough of that either. Like gut health ties so much to your mental health. Also, just to be clear, I'm not saying that everything can be solved with breathing exercises, diet. Like there are actual mental conditions where like you need medication. Like for instance, I was having, to be totally honest, at the beginning of the pandemic, I was having like crippling panic attacks, and I had to get put on some stuff to tune that out, because even just breathing exercises wasn't doing it. However, it made a hell of a difference. It's weird how much your body just sometimes just needs more oxygen, like it's as simple as that sometimes.
There's a great meme where it's like the guy who's depressed, like just throws on like running shoes and goes outside. And he's like, all my worries go out the window essentially. And it's true. It's just, for me, like exercise is so good, but it's when you're really depressed, for example, like same thing with you over the pandemic. For me, like my mental health went out the fucking window, and I was even suicidal at some points. And I'm happy to talk about it now because I'm at a point where it's like I've figured out what works for me. And I mean, I've always been conscious of my mental health because, long story short, this could go on forever, but my mom had schizophrenia. Depression runs in the women's side of my family, and I've always been more prone to depression. And over the pandemic, you throw, all these catalysts, you take away socialization, and my physical health went out the window, and pretty soon my own mental health followed. But I kind of was able to get through that, and I feel like, I like, thank you for even bringing this up, because it's like a lot of people are scared to talk about it.
It's hard to talk about.
And it's really hard to talk about, but it's so rewarding, because I used to keep this to myself, and I don't think I would be here if I continued to do that. And you realize how many people are in the same boat, that you're not alone in whatever mental health issues you're experiencing. I mean, in the case of my mom, for example, I saw the most extreme, which is like when she had mental breakdowns, it was very difficult to deal with. And, but it's a learning experience as well, that like this is a human thing to happen. And so, I think it's important that we talk about it. And side note, this podcast was actually going to be, I was going to start a podcast about mental health and creative. So I'm glad that we're broaching this subject, because I think there's a natural tendency for creatives to be predisposed to, mental health issues.
Yeah. It's part of what helps us be emotional in our like music creation and stuff like that. I mean, that's part of how I cope. And that's how when I knew that, well, I'll get into it after you finish your thought.
So the rest of my thoughts on this were going to be like, I've been so severely depressed that I couldn't get out of bed or do anything physical,
Been
and
there.
my physical health suffered because of that. And so I know exercise is like the thing that'll work the best for my depression. Anxiety, not so much. Breathing exercises are actually the best for that, for my anxiety, but don't help at all with depression. Right. And so I'm careful to recommend to people, like, yeah, just get out and exercise. It'll help, because it's really difficult to do when you're in that 100%. Headspace. And so what I've actually learned is exercise mimetics, like the sauna and even like cold exposure. The cold exposure is super difficult, but it's easier than getting up and going for a run when you're depressed. And so if you could take a 10-minute cold shower, don't start at 10 minutes, but if you could get there, work your way up, those little things will help get you on the right path. And actually, I'm a huge fan of the sauna, because say I go out, play a show, I'm out until 6 a.m. The next day, my mental health, and for the next following week, if I don't get my shit together, it's going to be a wreck. I'm going to be super depressed. And so it really affects me. And I've found, okay, I can't exercise, but I can sit in a fucking sauna for 40 minutes. And it's the same effect, where you get your heart rate up, your body, your core temperature gets up, and it really helps with my depression. And more so than any medication or anything that I've ever done, has been exercise in the sauna. It's really helped. And, for my anxiety, breathing exercises and meditation cured it pretty much.
Amazing.
I used to have crippling social anxiety. Which for an artist is really difficult, right? It's like if you're scared to leave your bedroom, and then you go out and you're playing in front of a crowd of 300 people, it leads you to do stupid shit like drink your face off and then black out. So I had to get that under control, and I still struggle with it like everybody does, but you have to put in the work. And that's hard to say, because it's like I know exactly what it feels like to not be able to put in the work. And so you have to find these little things that kind of hack it. And breathing exercises and sauna you could do on demand. Well, maybe not the sauna. You have to find a gym that, pay for the membership or whatever, but it's so worth it. And so I hope anybody listening, can kind of, if you're in that place, or you get to that place at some points, like you're not alone, and there are things that you could do,
Yeah. It's like, there's this great quote from this guy named Marcus Parks, who is, a host of a podcast I listen to, and he always says, because he has bipolar depression and a bunch of other things, and what he always says about mental health, like mental health is, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility, and that really resonated with me.
That's so good.
Yeah, I mean, because it isn't your fault. Like we go through this, but if you don't. And it's like yourself, it's hard to tell people like, oh, well, you just need to exercise or do these things, because everyone's experience with it is different, and there is no cure all. However, like if you have mental health issues, like do seek help. I mean, it's hard to go through alone, whether that's in the form of a psychiatrist, which is a good idea, or a support group or friends. I mean, it's important. If you just sit with it with yourself, it's only going to get worse. And I've had those days too often where you can't do anything. Like you can't get out of bed. You can't, just basically everything you were saying. And with the panic attacks, it was really bad.
That's super tough.
Yeah, I mean, like I'd heard about panic attacks before, but I never, until I was getting them once a week, I didn't understand like how crippling they are, where like you're afraid to do anything, because if you have a panic attack in the wrong place, like you're screwed. You feel like you're dying, like 100%. I don't know if you've had them before, but they're just awful.
And I've had them in kind of like the worst scenarios, where like my first like kind of festival that I played, I played my set, I was fine, and then I got off, and like it was like a certain set of circumstances where like I was like kind of arguing with my ex-girlfriend over like little shit, and like people were trying to talk to me after my set, and I had to like remove myself from the entire thing. I had to go sit and I like breathe it out, and I had a full-on panic attack. And I had friends I had just met for the first time, like, producers I was talking to online, and I was like, I can't even hang out with you because I'm going through this. And it's like, it's harrowing. And especially you're a music producer, right? Like, so you go from like sitting in your bedroom to performing in the most hyper social situation, and it's a cause, like it's directly related to cause like a panic
Yeah.
attack performing. So it's like, and I mean, I've had them now just in kind of like normal situations, but um, it was really startling to me because it was like I've had them on a small scale, but I never had like a full meltdown until like my mid 20s. And it's
For me, it was my late
harrowing
20s.
because
yeah,
I always felt like panicky, but I never had a full on my body is losing its shit moment. And it's scary because you feel like paralyzed and it's almost like locked in, where it's like you're experiencing things that
aren't real.
Your body isn't responding.
Yeah, I mean,
your body isn't doing.
It's like, and I'm not suicidal in any way, shape, or form, but like if life was a panic attack, it wouldn't be worth it. Like it's not like it's just it is that bad, you know, where like and sometimes it wasn't even having triggers, like it was just happening at random times, and I'm sure there was some sort of trigger over it. Like the first time it happened, I was driving, and that was really scary because I had to pull off. I was getting tunnel vision, like I just couldn't see anything. I was like, I need to, and I was in the car with two friends. I'm like, I'm sorry, we need to pull over. Like I don't know what's going on, but like I'm dying. And like that's obviously not something you want to hear when you're riding in the car with someone driving. Thank God we're all okay, you know, but then they might be, if they listen to this podcast, they know exactly which time I'm talking about, but luckily it's under control now. But you know, it's you know, and that was right before the pandemic too. So then the pandemic started, I was realizing, oh, this wasn't a one-time thing. This is happening a lot. I need to figure this out.
Man.
And it's like we all have our own struggles that we gotta work through. Then on top of everything we've just been talking about with like how to deal with careers, with music and being creative, and then you got to throw everything that's wrong with your brain on top of it. And how can you best, you know, minimize that or find healthy habits like you have to be able to focus on the things that you enjoy about life. And it's everyone has their own struggles and it's difficult, but like you know, once again, it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility. Like there are things that you can do to make things better, and you don't want to hurt the people around you. You certainly don't want to hurt yourself. And it's hard to get through those things, but you know, there are always things that can make it better. But it's never an easy thing, right? Like it's never just like, oh, do this one thing and you're going to be totally great. Like,
no, it's a series of things that you have to figure out and keep tweaking, and every day is different too. So it's like, and that's another thing too, is that like you mentioned, like, you know, like talking to people is difficult, but you realize that like, you know, your friends, you're not, even if you do lash out at your friends and you're having a bad mental health day, it's like they're gonna forgive you, like they love you. And so, you know, if you have a bad night or whatever, it's not, they're gonna understand if you talk to them about it and you say like, hey, I'm like, I was just having a panic attack and I lashed out because you're the nearest thing that, you know, it's like people will mostly be forgiving, and that's something that like my anxiety will give me a panic attack, right? But my depression will tell me never to fucking speak to those people ever again because you're banned. Like, but that's not the case. Most people would understand that, like, you know, you had a bad night or whatever, and they still love you as a person. And so you do have to talk.
Or else
to
you have the wrong
it.
friends if they don't.
Then they're pieces of shit and get rid of them anyway. But
you know, it's like they should be able to understand because everyone goes through their own stuff. I mean, obviously different severity levels, but you know, if you can't have a bad day, I mean, are we even human at that point? You know?
Yeah. And that's, you know, the ups and downs. I feel like creative people, especially, like you just tend to feel things more. So like, you know, the lows are low, the highs are high. Maybe they call that bipolar or whatever, but like, it's like, that also makes you really experience something that's different from other people. It's not a bad thing.
It helps you grow.
You just have to learn how to, it helps you grow. And I think those are the people too that tend to be the most creative or like the most successful over the long term, because you're able to come from that low, then you're going to be so much better if you learn from that, you know?
You can't have peaks without troughs, right? Like,
yeah, you need that contrast.
Yeah, absolutely. Or else life would be
another
boring
thing too,
or miserable.
Yeah, I would hate to not experience life in the way that like I do emotionally sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Like, okay, the lows are really low, but the highs are really high. And so it's like I wouldn't want to change
Mm-hmm.
that. I just want to learn how to deal with that. And I think, especially like I haven't been like diagnosed with like bipolar 2, but it sounds pretty familiar, like which is just like, you're in extremes of moods. And I technically have just like regular depression or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, but
Yeah, I
my
have
aunt has manic
GAD as they
depression.
call it. It's just
Yeah.
general
Yeah.
anxiety.
Generalizing.
Yeah, anxiety
Yeah,
disorder. Yeah.
exactly. So, but like bipolar 2 to me sounds like just a creative type B person living their life. Like, which is like, you have mood swings, but like you just feel stuff a lot essentially. And so it's like, I don't, my thing is like, I don't want to nerf those highs and lows. What I want to do is learn how to operate within them better. And so, like you said before, like you burn candles at both ends, and maybe you sacrifice your health. And what I've realized is that on the highs that feels good to do, but then it worsens the lows, right? So like
100%.
finding that strategy to cope is really important, because you can then sustain those high points even longer. I think,
Yeah.
I've been,
I'd imagine
another thing
that's
is
true,
too,
but I have no idea because I haven't been there yet.
it's also hard to tell when you are
Yeah, I'm
there,
sure.
because
Yeah.
when you're standing in the middle of the picture, you can't see what the big picture is. And so you don't always know, like, what is it? Wow, what show is that? It's The Office, where he's like, I wish somebody told me like we were in the good days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like what, like these are the good days, and I wish somebody told me. And so you don't really realize, when you're at the high points, because you're just operating at a certain level. And I think meditation for me also is kind of giving me that trigger to realize, like in the moment, oh, I'm energized by this certain thing, but if I keep going this route, I'm going to burn myself
Yeah.
out, and I'm going to end up crashing hard. And that, so it's really important to be aware too, because you could use that to your advantage.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you could sustain the momentum, and maybe you could prevent the lows from being as
I'm
low.
curious, what are some of like the sources you would recommend for getting into meditation? Because everything I've ever tried, it's always hard to actually just like clear my mind is always racing at like a million miles per hour, and that's always been my
Yeah.
struggle with meditation, is not being able to. And I used to have really bad insomnia too because of it, and I think
Yeah.
part of maybe why I work so hard on things sometimes is because it helped a lot. Like in grad school, like my insomnia almost disappeared just because I was so exhausted all the time. Like there was,
Yeah.
but with meditation, that seems like a way healthier way of dealing with, mind racing type stuff. I'm just kind of curious
Well,
what sort of things you'd recommend.
So, my favorite app that really got me to change, because I used to try and use like Headspace and Calm,
Mm-hmm.
and like it was whatever. It gets you to sit down and breathe and focus on breathing for a little bit. But my favorite app that kind of like changed the game for me was an app called Waking Up by this
Waking up.
neuroscientist Sam Harris.
I'm gonna
And
type that down right now.
yeah, Waking Up is great. I recommend it to everybody who's serious about meditation, but it's kind of at that point where they don't really understand it, or they think that they're doing it poorly or whatever. Because meditation isn't about like clearing your head of things; it's about being aware of what's
Interesting. Okay.
happening. So it's not like the end game isn't to reduce thoughts, it's to be conscious of thoughts. And the first thing in this introductory course in waking up, you spend like 2 weeks or so just kind of paying attention to breathing to train your focus. And then the next step is seeing where thoughts come from, which is like kind of like esoteric, right? But then you realize your brain is just always in overdrive. You're
Mm-hmm.
always like, if you just try to sit down and think, you're gonna, or not think,
It's
you're gonna
impossible.
automatically have thoughts. It's actually
I've
impossible to
tried it
not
many
think.
times. It is
Yeah,
like just imagine a void of nothing. It's not possible. Yeah.
it's not possible. And so the goal of meditation is really not to like enter that void. Eventually you can get there, and
Mm-hmm.
it's an experience that's kind of amazing, and you kind of learn how to trigger this. But it's not the end game. The end
Mm-hmm.
game is just cultivating awareness. And
Interesting.
so that's step one. And then, eventually you get to a point where you can sit down and you can enter a meditative state by just kind of like, triggering. I want to be careful about how I put this, because it's like there's a Buddhist term that's called nothingness. Essentially, that's the term for it. But it's not nothingness. It's everything. It's your immediate connection with everything that exists in this moment. It's the present moment. And so their term for it is kind of morbid sounding, but it's actually everything. And that's the space in which your brain just experiences experience. You're just aware of things. And so it's almost the difference of like watching a movie on the screen and being in the movie. And that's kind of what you're training eventually in meditation.
That's fascinating.
To just be in this present moment. And it's really difficult. And people don't see the value in meditation because they're like, oh, I'm just fucking sitting. But it's actually really important, because if you learn to meditate, anything can become a meditation. And so people find this with like archery and stuff, where it's like they get into flow. And
for me, it's driving.
Yeah. And you can actually, a lot of people will experience this naturally with the sunset, where your brain automatically goes into the present moment, because it's such a surreal thing to look at, that it just shuts off this constant overdrive and thinking about the past and the future, and you go into the present moment. And that's what you're trying to cultivate with meditation, is the ability, like a light switch, to just say, I'm no longer past and present focused. Or past and future focused. I'm now present focused. And that's what you're cultivating through meditation. And it's really difficult, but it's amazing. It could change your experience fundamentally in everything that you do. So highly recommend.
That's so interesting to me, because like that last bit of it totally made sense to me in terms of like sunsets and things like that. And like with science stuff. And one of the things that got me into science, now I'm realizing, was because of those present mind states. Like when you look at night at stars and planets and sunsets, and also this one moment once where I was flying east. You know how like your transatlantic flights are always at night, and usually I like to sleep on those, but one time I didn't because I'm an idiot. And when you're flying east and you see the sun coming up while you're flying into it, and you actually get a feel for the Earth's rotation, it's a pretty surreal thing to see. Also, the solar eclipse that happened a few years ago, that was probably the biggest one. And it is I see now, like I didn't really understand meditation when I asked you about it. And now that you've kind of painted those examples, I know what that state of mind feels like. And the ability to trigger that sounds pretty useful, to be able to be focused on the present in that way. Yeah, you've really inspired me to get into that, because that does sound very healthy.
Oh, good.
Yeah. I'll definitely be taking a look at that.
A lot of people don't get that either. They're like, why would I want to do that when I could just I could just look at a sunset? But it impacts everything that you do, and everything can become like this magical experience, because it is a fucking magical experience for you to be alive, right? And so, they talk about like Buddhist monks who achieve enlightenment. They're just always in that state.
That's incredible.
But I mean, I can't do that. Like I'll experience nothingness if I sit down for 20 minutes every day, and maybe like 2 or 3 times I'll be able to sustain it for longer than a second. And I wonder if anybody in like into Buddhism is going to be mad about this, because they're often mad at Sam Harris, because this specific type of Buddhist practice is like they get to a certain point, but a lot of people like underestimate, or like they think that it's bad for people to get into meditation with that descriptor, because then they're like, you might undervalue it, right? Where it's like, oh, you could just be present. And like people who practice this specific type are like, we shouldn't tell anybody, they should figure it out on their own, because then the experience is so much different. It's, it's not, you're not imposing any biases or anything with it. And so,
which is somewhat fair, but if it's helping people at the same time,
right. That's my idea too. Like, it's like the more people I could get their foot in the door, then maybe they'll get to that point. And it's not like it's an easy fucking thing either.
Right,
it's like, first you have to learn how to focus, and then you have to learn how to be aware of your thoughts and your surroundings and your sensory experience. And then you have to find what that moment feels like. so that you can trigger it over and over and over and over again. It's called, I think the term for it is like glimpsing at first, where you kind of realize that you're in the present moment and you're like, oh, this is what that fucking feels like without my brain being on overdrive. But it's like a flash, and it's almost impossible to recognize unless they have like certain things that like, will trigger this experience for you. It's like in Waking Up, he'll keep saying, look for the one who is looking, right? It's like, which is a ridiculous fucking thing to tell somebody, right? And you're like, where do thoughts come from? And then eventually you find this moment that's like, oh, they're not coming from anywhere. They're just popping into existence. And the one who is looking is really everything. It's like everything, you're this present moment. And so finding that particular moment is really difficult to do. And it takes a lot of training. And it maybe took me like a year and a half of doing the daily meditations on the app before I was like, oh, I just missed it. I saw it and I'm there. And then now after maybe like 3 years of doing it, I'm like, I can get there like pretty regularly.
That's
and
great.
It's really useful because everything changes at that point, and you kind of realize how fucking fucked up your experience is day to day, that you get so taken away from this that every moment is this fucking magical thing that you can revisit, but your brain is just on overdrive, worried about everything.
I wonder how many people are capable of committing to something like that these days, you know? Like, it's a hard thing to commit to taking the time to do anything consistently with everything going on.
It's like anything else, though. It's like, and it's actually better that you do it for like 5 minutes a day every day than, really set aside an hour.
Yeah.
Some people will disagree with me because some people, like, I don't know if you listen to Naval, who's like, he's a great thinker of our time, hangs out with like Tim Ferriss, tweets a bunch of stuff, very interesting guy. But his take on meditation is like to sit with your thoughts in silence until you've run through them all, which I think is a useful way of like kind of getting there. But not everybody has I'm super anxious. And if I did that, it would take me years to sit every day for hours until my brain is done. Or not done, but like kind of subsides, where that's a different approach and you're kind of muscling through it. But I think being able to learn how to meditate and just doing it for like 5 minutes every day is more impactful, in my opinion. And that's kind of how I do it, where it's like, I've learned how to meditate, and now whatever chance I get, even if it's 2 minutes, that's better than no minutes.
Yeah.
And it's the same thing for a lot of things. If you get in the gym every day for a half an hour, that's better than going to the gym 3 times a week for 3 hours.
It even relates to what we were talking about with social media. Like, posting one story is better than posting no stories, because it'll do something. I also wonder though, I mean, and like, again, my PhD is in chemical physics, not psychology or anything like this. So this is pure speculation, but I'm curious if I'm wondering if that's one of the reasons why exercise does help with anxiety. Because of the fact that when you're exercising, your mind kind of just goes through its motions, and you're more just focused on one step after the next. And it seems like it does kind of put you in that sort of present mind state.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering if that's one of the reasons why it's healthy.
So there's a couple different types of meditation. I mean, actually there's a lot, but the two in my mind, there's transcendental meditation, which a lot of creatives love, but it's more focused on like, kind of like you said, like the experience of exercise is like, your brain is kind of elsewhere, and like it's a little bit different than like Dzogchen Buddhism is the one that Waking Up is about, and that's about like kind of recognizing the present moment and being in it, whereas like transcendental meditation seems to be like escaping to the present moment.
Interesting.
And you're not really aware, you're not purposefully finding awareness, you're actually disregarding awareness. And so it becomes, I think it's a different part of your brain. And I think it is useful. But people who are practicing these will actually tell you do one or the other, because you can't get good at both at the same time simultaneously, which is super interesting. And I have no background in neuroscience or anything, but I find that super
fascinating,
super strange. And actually, like, I guess it makes sense, right? You're training a muscle in your brain that, I think transcendental meditation is very similar to exercise, where it's like you're just going through these kind of motions and you're letting your brain wander off. So I think it's probably similar, probably operates on the same mechanisms. I don't know.
Yeah.
Super interesting.
We have so much to learn about the human brain, man. I mean, it's like...
Oh my God, don't get me started. Sam Harris's wife, Annika, did this.
Anakin?
Sorry. Annika?
Annika. No, that's nice. I'm sorry. I've been watching too much Star Wars. And
yeah. So Annika Harris wrote... and now I'm just stuck on Star Wars. But
and we've been talking about meditation. I've just been like, yeah, Jedi. Like,
well, maybe they were just really good at meditation, and they're like, they were able to project that on other people. Who knows? But she wrote a book on consciousness and like panpsychism, which is like that maybe everything is conscious on some level, right? Like even on a molecular level, maybe there's an experience for that atom that there is like to have.
Let's go into quantum mechanics. I'm ready.
So very, very surface level for me, and you're going to school me, but I'm sure that sounds ridiculous on some points, but the more I think about it, it's like actually super interesting. But consciousness, like the hard problem of consciousness for me is like, why are we not focusing on all of our efforts on this? Because like to our knowledge, we're the only conscious things in the universe. So like, shouldn't we like be figuring that out? And so I find it super interesting that we haven't.
I mean, I could talk about this for a while, as we've been saying like every 2 minutes, because we've just been covering everything. But like, the problem is consciousness isn't well defined, right? And in science, you always want things to be well defined.
But that's such a tricky thing, because like I don't think you can define consciousness I don't think you can, because you don't know what it's like as a conscious.
You only know what your own experience is, right?
Yeah, so it's a catch-22.
But it's like when people like to throw these loose things around, like everything is connected. It's like, well, it is. I mean, like we're all made up of the same stuff. Like we're all participating in this universe or multiverse, if it is a multiverse, whatever. And it's along the,
unlike my alias would suggest, maybe it is a multiverse.
Well, maybe there is. I mean, your alias suggests that there is something in contrast to it, right? There is the anti-monoverse, if you will. But no, I mean, like it's in the sense that like it's all, what am I trying to say? I've been talking for like 2.5 hours, so it's like
this has been good.
But, I mean, we're touching on the juicy stuff now. No, I don't apologize. This is great.
It's gonna turn into a 6-hour podcast.
Yeah, right.
Bullshitting about stuff that we know. Well, you know something about. I know nothing about.
We're in the speculative part of things, because it's like with quantum mechanics, for instance, it's like the observation of things has the final say in a measurement, because like things can be in what's called a superposition state, and then once you make a measurement, it collapses, as it's called, into one specific thing. So like a particle could be like delocalized like a wave. So it's like if you remember your bell curves from grade school, where there's like a Gaussian distribution, it's like it's most probable that the particle is here, but until you make the measurement, you don't know if it's here or here or here or whatever. An observation is made like, it's not just like I'm looking at it. You can make a measurement with like a laser or like a detector. It's just like, it's the act of like forcing this thing to be in one location that collapses it. And if you make a statistical distribution, that's how you get the Gaussian shape. But it always kind of goes into this philosophical question of like, what is an observation, and why do things behave a certain way until they are observed, right? And it leads to a lot of pseudoscience, but there is something genuinely intriguing about that, and it does bring up questions about what consciousness is, and like maybe, I mean, there's a poetic phrase I've heard before where it's like, we're the way that the universe is observing itself, more or less.
Yep.
And I do like that. Yeah, I love it too. There are other people who would just say we're a bug in the simulation. But like, I think either way, it's not, you can't prove or disprove either one. But I do love the idea that we are like the way of the universe observing itself. Because otherwise, if we are the only, well, or the aliens that are out there too, any sort of sentient being, if we're the only things that are properly conscious, then what is the purpose of it? Like what, is the universe like this one living, breathing thing? In a way it is, because it's doing its own thing. Entropy is always increasing, etc. Yeah, it's just it's fun. It's fun stuff to think about.
I like problematic to quantify, because it's like we said, your experience is your experience and mine is mine. And how do we know? Like I was having this great chat with people about artificial intelligence. We're like, where do you draw the line on, like, when does it have sentience, and what is that like for that?
We're a long way off from that.
Yeah,
I don't care what the Google thing says. Like, as someone who works with machine learning a lot, because if you've used iZotope products, we use a healthy amount of artificial intelligence, or machine learning, neural nets, whatever you want to call it. And it's an interesting conversation in terms of where do you define something as sentient, like to use a Turing test or stuff like that. Sorry, I'll let you. I want to talk about this too, but I'll let you. I interrupted you because this is just great stuff.
Let me think, because like for me, it's like I don't think the definition is so important as like that anything is having, and that's kind of what the panpsychism theory kind of like changed for me, is like maybe it's just possible for like this thing to have an experience even though we know nothing about it. And so like where do you define consciousness? And I just don't think that that's important. I don't think it's going to matter to how we replicate it. Like where I define consciousness is going to be different from everybody else's, and therefore I don't think it really matters. Like, because we're going to get to a certain point where we are hopefully going to be able to develop sentience in something, and therefore it doesn't really matter because that thing is having an experience like at all.
Yeah, I mean,
like, so I think it's more important that we just do the thing and we just continually improve artificial intelligence, and maybe not worry about like
robots taking over the world,
right? Because like you said, we're ways off, and I don't think that there's gonna be like, I mean, maybe I'm just naive and like robots will take over the world, but I don't think that's a possibility like that's strong. I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if they
maybe we're just so far off that I'm just not threatened by that, right?
Well, it's also like if we do, maybe that's our role in the universe, that we created ultimate, like superior beings, and that's stealing out of science fiction. I mean, that's not a new idea, but like, I mean, at the end of the day, like it always blows my mind that it's all subatomic particles that on a large scale end up making craziness, right? and also who's to say, like you were saying with Anakin Skywalker, sorry, Annika Harris, that like maybe there's some form of sentience within atoms and molecules. Like, who's to say it's all operating under the same set of rules that we are? And also, who's to say that we're like, what are we considered? Like, why is a dog or a cat less sentient or less conscious than we are, just because they act in simpler ways? So does that mean that a cat compared to an ant is the way that we're thinking about things? And this is how I always end up thinking about free will and fate. And I've constantly been moving closer and closer to the fact that everything is, we don't actually have any choices. We just have an illusion of choice. Like,
you're gonna love Waking Up. Actually, there's a whole section of the app dedicated to free will. He's actually written a great book about it as well that changed my perspective on free will, because I used to think that I haven't, and I've kind of realized that I don't.
It's okay to still have that impression. Like, I want to think that I'm making decisions. And obviously, like, you can't just like sit on the couch all day playing video games and being like, well, I guess it was just meant to be. Like, like you should still take control of your life. It just is probably true that it was always inevitable that you were going to make those decisions in the first place. but that doesn't matter. You can still like be part of the illusion, you know, like make your decisions.
For me, it's actually more useful to think of other people, like realizing that they didn't have, say in whatever that they did, because like my experience is my experience. And it doesn't really matter, but my reaction to those experiences depending upon like what I think is going on in other people's heads or whatever. And so you realize that like, free will is an illusion probably. And therefore the things that these people are doing to me are not, or I shouldn't even say that, that's a negative connotation, but the things that are happening for other people are not, they're just a certain set of circumstances,
initial
and
parameters that went into the equation. Yeah,
exactly. And sometimes it's garbage in, garbage out, garbage in, garbage out, where it's like, bad things happen. But, I think it's helpful to realize that like things are not in your control. And that kind of goes into like Stoicism too, which I'm really big on, kind of goes into, Zen Buddhism as well. They're synergistic in a way, philosophies. But like Stoics are all about like the locus of control. Like what should I be offended by, or what should I put my energy to? And they teach you to focus on what's important, which is what's within your control, and everything else that's external is like just either ignore or don't put any like energy into, essentially.
Yeah. And it's hard to do that these days too, with like the 24-hour news cycle and social media and all of that stuff. But I mean that, and also with what, I mean, bringing it back to like being envious of other artists and things like that. It's like, do you have control over their career, or do you have control over your own? Right. And like, so what are the things that you can control, whether it was predetermined or not? Who cares? Like you still on this macroscopic level, like you do have control, right? Even if it is an illusion, you still have it. You can still make those decisions. They seem like conflicting ideas, but they're not. It's like, but either way, I mean, that sounds very cool. I'll have to look into that as well, because it is sort of all about this sort of influence of control. It's like what, gravitational fields are like. It's like we are controlled by the sun, the moon is controlled by us, but they're also all interconnected at the same time. And eventually it gets far out enough that it's not as much effect, but it's still there. But it's not real. Like if the sun just disappeared, some shit's going to happen, but it's going to be mostly within like our solar system that it happens. Like that's the sun's sphere of influence. And maybe some astronomer is going to be listening to this that knows better than me. Oh, well, the Milky Way is also going to adjust in this way, but it's like, okay, but you know what I mean? I'm just trying to give a nice gravitational field analogy, and you're just picking it apart for no reason.
It's funny because like I used to just shit on people who do like astrology, right? Like where it's
I still do, but let's talk about this.
But
let's get into it.
I then realized I'm like, probably on some level it does affect things, right? Like where
it does.
The movement, so I was talking to my buddy, and we're big into like crypto, and we'll follow the market and whatever. And there's this chick who does like astrology crypto predictions.
Oh my God.
Marin. And she like does like moon cycles and shit, and which is funny, moon cycles crypto, but it's odd. It's odd how accurate she can be sometimes. And she'll like just call shit, and we look back and we're like, yo, she was fucking right. And I'm like, and then I'm realizing, I'm like, there probably is some level of like the moon impacting our biological response, and therefore our moods change, and that affects our investments and our markets, right?
Maybe it sounds like in that case it's more of a coincidence, but
yeah, of course. No,
I get it. It's like the way that I always explain it to astrologers or just anyone who's willing to listen to me rant about this is that, like, yes, everything has an effect on everything else, but there's a thing called negligibility, like something being negligible. And that's how most scientific models are created. Like, if you want to solve, like, okay, if a car is going this fast, how long is it going to take to get from point A to B? Maybe that's a bad example. the point is, if you want to take like a simple problem and you want to say, okay, now we have to calculate the whole universe in order to figure out how fast it's going to take me to drive my car from point A to point B. That is totally unsustainable. And you probably will get the same answer as if you just ignored everything but the car. And, right. Or like you don't even consider the curvature of the earth if you're going, whatever. The point I'm making, or if it's flat, you don't consider it at all. No, I'm kidding. But like the point I'm making is in science, you always make, or in mathematical models, at least, you always make approximations of things that aren't really going to affect the result to like 35 decimal points after the zero, right?
Yeah.
Like it, for all means and purposes, it's negligible. And where the position of like the constellations are relative to Earth is not going to have an effect on like your mood. I mean, it might in some esoteric way. But I saw I saw Orion's belt tonight and it had me feeling all so gushy inside. So I bought Bitcoin. I mean, maybe there is something to that. But
my perspective on this kind of changed when I realized it was I forget if it was like a full moon or whatever, but and this is going to sound so ridiculous, right? But I'm
ready for it.
Everybody I spoke to, I had a really rough night sleeping, and everybody I spoke to was like, yeah, I just couldn't sleep last night or whatever. And it was like, whatever phase of the fucking moon we were at. Yeah, right. So think about that. When my sleep gets destroyed, then my mood is I'm a little bit more anxious the next day or whatever. And maybe I know it's ridiculous, right? But in some way, it probably does impact things at 1 to 2% that my choices that day are going to be different. So would I bet the house on moon cycles? No, but I'm open to the idea of it probably does affect my physiology to the point where maybe some of those predictions are a little bit more accurate. Because
I will say this, if any of the if any of the astronomical objects are going to affect us on a personal level, it's probably going to be the moon. I mean, it's the closest one. It has an effect on the tides.
That's what I mean. It's got to have some
and also
on your body,
if it's a full moon, there's more light coming in your window. Maybe that's keeping you from going to sleep. I don't know, but the amount of decisions that people make based off of astrology. I can't tell you how many times I've swiped left because someone has astrology in their profile. And I'm just okay, because they're swipe left if you're not a Capricorn or whatever. And I'm if that is your deciding factor for who you get along with, it just seems unreasonably exclusive, and it's or they'll just be. My favorite thing to do is when I was just in Toronto recently, and I have so many friends that are into astrology. It's not they're
gonna see this conversation.
They're gonna love it. They're gonna be this is classic Cory. And they'll be you'll say something and it's just oh yeah, of course you're an Aries, or something. They just use it as a cop out, and so I started.
Mercury is in Gatorade today.
Yeah, Mercury is in Gatorade.
Have a bad day.
Yeah. I mean, and I actually didn't know what I had to ask one of my astrologist friends about what Mercury in retrograde even means, and it's apparently when it starts going the other direction because of the rotation, and that just seems even sillier to me because it's it's not actually moving the other direction. It's just the rotation. Right?
Yeah.
So and the revolution of Mercury. But I mean, it's fun. And the thing about astrology is it doesn't harm people as far as I know.
Well,
and so as long if you believe in astrology, fair enough. It's not going to hurt anyone. I'm okay with it. If you're an anti-vaxxer, that could hurt some people potentially. So that's a little bit, and I have friends that aren't vaccinated and stuff like that. I still love them to death, but I'm just trying to choose an example that isn't, that does have consequences versus astrology, which astrologists will disagree with me, but it doesn't have consequences in my opinion.
Well, I mean, it might, depending on what level you apply it on, right? It's
maybe
how does that affect your operation? It's if you're making major life decisions based on astrology, that could be problematic. You might, I don't know, fuck up your kid's life because you were well, Mercury's in retrograde, so that's therefore, whatever.
So you're not allowed to go to school today and that was
Right,
the day where
exactly,
they
or-
taught them sex ed, and so they ended up having
Yeah.
unprotected sex, and now
The
they have a
possibilities are
pregnancy.
kind of influenced. So I
Yeah,
wouldn't say
okay.
there's
Okay.
zero, it's a
Everything is
non-zero
connected.
chance that
Everything
yeah.
is connected. So,
But everything is relative. It's what's your risk tolerance, right? It's like, is that, and like you said, the vaccine thing is something that has, actual
effects.
quantifiable,
Yeah.
impact. So,
I just want to say how much I've loved this conversation. We've like covered like went from like mental health to astrology real quick, and I'm for it. I'm all about it. Like this has been really awesome.
This is why I picked you as one of our first guests, because
Thanks,
I feel
man.
like we could get into it on so many different levels, and I'd love to revisit this and do another one down the road. And like I would have watched this back and be like, okay, I gotta not go all over on these things.
100%, but I know. I mean, like I'm definitely more than happy to come on again, and we don't have to stop now or anything. I was just reflecting on how much awesome stuff we've talked about, and how nice it's been to be able to talk about everything. And yeah, maybe it'll come off as a little bit like when we're watching this back and just being like, oh yeah, we went real quick to different times. But I think that's genuine in a way, because that's how conversations go. And it's like we touch on one thing and it's like, oh, we got to get into that more because that's a really interesting thing too. Oh, and that's really interesting and that's really impactful too. And like, I mean, this is all stuff that I think hopefully people find interesting, because we've covered a lot of ground. And just remember, kids, at the end of the day, we're just trying to tell you that astrology isn't real. No, I'm kidding.
That we got whoever was gonna subscribe to this thing is now out.
These guys
are just preaching about astrology. But I think there is value in talking about these things like openly, because it's like especially a podcast is so like different than like when you ever go out and just talk to somebody one-on-one. We never would have gotten on these topics unless we were in this situation, pretty much, which is kind of why I started doing this thing, because some of the most interesting people that I've ever met, I haven't been able to pick their brain about, theoretical physics and consciousness and mental health. And
it's true. You don't really want to bring that up at a party, do you? It can be fun. I used to do that all the time in college, and like my friends would just be like, Cory, can you stop? Every time I come outside, you're talking about physics and like no one cares. And I'm just like, but I do.
Oh my God. Yeah, dude.
But sometimes they do care. You want to be able to dig into these things, And
then, there have also been the scenarios where it's like, especially you get it with like music producers a lot, where it's like, you'll see somebody out at the show or whatever, and you're like, oh, let's just go talk about music production for like 2 hours. And then by the end of it, both of your girlfriends are like, could you guys fucking get out into the world and stop talking to each other? You goddamn
What's
nerds.
your like? Would you rather use saturation or overdrive in this instance? Like all this stuff. But you do learn from. Yeah. We haven't even talked about like technical production today, which is actually kind of a breath of fresh air. I wouldn't mind talking about it, but it's also just like it's refreshing that we can talk for like almost 3 hours and we haven't even brought up an EQ or a compressor or anything, and it's like, yeah, that's nice.
Well, here's the thing, that I didn't want to bring you on and just grill you about that, because like that is a shared interest of ours, but I don't think it's applicable to like, or I don't think it's always fun to just be like constantly in work mode. And so it's like, I didn't want to, we could definitely get into it and we could nerd out on that, but I think like maybe we should do that on a separate podcast, because it's like, I have so many questions and I'm not even prepared for that mentally, to be like, all these things that I want to ask you about iZotope products and audio processing.
I'd be more than happy to talk about it though. But like, yeah,
we're already totally 2 hours and 40 minutes in and we haven't even touched
No one's gonna, it'd have to be like a follow-up episode. This is part 2 or 3.
And I'm thinking of ways like, how do we incentivize people to get like involved? So maybe that's like a pitch where it's like, subscribe to our newsletter and you get this. If you want to see that interview, then maybe you subscribe to the newsletter.
Patreon.
Join the Patreon or something. And
you'll see how Cory reveals exactly how iZotope's machine learning technology works, so that you can steal it all for yourself now.
And that's a very specific audience that. Like going back to the topic of like, not everything is small talk, right? It's like, this is something that I've kind of had to get used to is that like I'm always disappointed when the conversation is surface level because I'm like, why
Mhm.
can't we just talk about these fucking super deep things like
Right.
mental health and music production? And it's like, oh, because 99% of people are just not disinterested by that, and they'd rather talk about sports or whatever. Like,
True
and that's
crime.
fine. Yeah,
That's
true crime. Yeah.
that's my escape of
Oh my god, you
choice.
should talk to my girlfriend next time because
Does she
she
listen to
was.
last podcast on the left? Because
Yes, I think she does.
yeah,
I get in the car and they're
then
fucking
she'll
going on. I'm like,
understand.
how do you sleep at night?
Yeah,
Like,
she'll understand. She'll understand my Marcus Parks reference then about mental health. I mean,
oh my god.
last podcast on the left, though, to be fair, is like as successful as it is for a reason because they throw comedy into the mix as
Yeah.
well, and it's a little bit
Yeah.
easier to take your true crime with the side of comedy because it's just. My
I think
mom thinks it's terrible. She's like, how can they like bring light on such terrible things? And I'm like, because it helps you learn,
oh
like to be
yeah.
able to swallow it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's my favorite genre on like Netflix is what's now called like dark comedy or whatever, right? It's
Hmm.
like, you can't not everything could be like 100% upside or
Yep.
100% downside. It's like it makes it more palatable. It's
Nothing is
actually
black or white ever.
yeah.
It's all gray area. And I think that's a problem in society in general right now is that no one understands how complicated and gray things are. It's like,
Mm,
dude, politics is the worst. It's like you're either 100% on my side or 100% against me. I'm like, humans don't work like that. Like,
no.
it's not like, you know, most people are in the middle somewhere.
And I think that's such an important skill set to have to realize that, like, you're not this one thing, you're this
Yeah.
constantly changing thing, which
Uh-oh.
politics blows my mind.
You dropped out
Like,
for a second, but we're good.
oh, by the way, this is recording internally. So,
Oh, perfect.
whatever, like when there's skips, yeah, it just gives me, it'll upload the source files. And so any like lags on any, I should have covered that beforehand, but yeah, so don't even worry about it. But, like politics like blows my mind because it's like people just play for one team and they just represent that one team, and it's like especially we have a two party system. You're either for me or against me, and it's like that's why I was never
Yeah.
interested in politics when I was younger because it never made sense to me. Like honestly, sports for me, like I played hockey when I was younger, but I don't understand fanaticism for one
Oh,
team,
bro.
right? It's like, and I get it.
Go
But I
dogs.
like
That's
I
all I'm
get
gonna
it. I
say.
get it. You're from
Yeah,
this.
man.
You get this. You're from this one area and you support the local team, whatever. But it's like if you're like if your whole day is ruined because your fucking team lost or whatever, it's like I'm a little concerned that that's not
Bro,
productive.
this is something I've given up on because any of my Southern brethren will know that like SEC football is life. And I've given the dogs my pitch, but like I wept like a baby when we won the national championship a few months ago because I literally been waiting, and I am one of those people where my day will be ruined if Georgia loses a big football game, and I know no,
So
but
I'm
it's
judging
fine
you.
because like I
I'm
always
sorry.
talk about this, like especially like ex-girlfriends and people who like just didn't understand like why, or just people here in Boston. I mean, like they think they like the Patriots, but like they don't understand. How fanatic we are in the Southeast about college football is unseen anywhere in the world except Europe and South America with like their football, right? Like it's about as close as you can get in the States to like pure fanaticism, right? And we've been talking about science and engineering and careers and music production, and like obviously I know inside my brain my day should not get ruined about something I have no control over and is just like a football game. It's like it's a fucking game, right? But my heart and my soul, like I would take if the dogs were like a collective entity, I would take a bullet for it. Like it's that important. Even though in my
Wow.
mind I know it 100%
Wow.
shouldn't be. But like you can't help it. It's just like how you were raised, and going to school there, of course, didn't help much when it came to that because I just got more ingrained in like this cult of the dog, which is a beautiful thing. It is a beautiful thing,
Mm,
though. I will say, like the we're talking about people and politics and being so far apart and just like not just thinking things through and seeing that everything is complicated. It is a beautiful thing to see so many different people come together in camaraderie over a game. It's incredible is what it is. I mean,
yeah.
that's the beautiful thing about sports. However, what I will say is like, yeah, We won the national championship. Been waiting for that my whole life. So glad I got to talk about the dogs on this podcast, by the way, because but like once a day for like 2 weeks, like I would just tear up random parts of the day, like, oh my god, we won. It's a crazy thing, like how much that can affect your mood, and it's like it's literally a game. And in college football at that, I mean, these are 18 to 22-year-old kids playing a game.
I will say college football though, like it's such a specific thing, and it's like it's not like the NFL where everybody is like, you know, they're just super well trained,
getting paid massive. Lots of
it's
money.
Like these are like it's yeah, and it's a more organic thing where it's like you go to a college football game and you go to an NFL game, you're seeing two different leagues of play, right? And so for me it's more interesting, and I can understand like, and the level of camaraderie that I think you have with like something like that, it is different. And I think it is beautiful because like, I mean, I'm from New Jersey. So like our sports teams are kind of divided in this area where it's like, I mean, I know people who are like, I'm a Devils fan, right? And so
best goalie of
like,
all
I'm from
time,
New Jersey,
right?
But like yeah, right. But it's like I'm not like a fanatic over it. It's like I would never go out in the street and fight somebody over the Devils, but I do see, you know, like kind of the level of camaraderie that comes from sports. And I think, you know, humans are supposed to have that for sure. And like I think sports especially is a good kind of solution where like it used to be like we used to go to church, and now we're like more secular, and so we're missing this kind of like community that we used to have as humans. And I think sports are a pretty good filler for that, just without the, you know, religion. And I think when things do become like problematic is like when people are violent or hate over people. Them, right? But like we shouldn't get to that level, but like I get like, you know, supporting, you know, the local team and like going crazy for it. I love that. Just a little worried when it comes to anything. It's like, why are we so fanatic over?
Because we treat it like sports, and like, we shouldn't. Insanity. I mean, and I agree with you that we shouldn't like hate anyone or be violent over sports. However, that being said, if you are listening to this and you went to the University of Florida, you were an awful person, and I hate you. No, I'm kidding. I just had to throw that in there. But no, I completely agree with you. The camaraderie is beautiful, but when it turns into something, you know, divisive is when it's bad. And that's the thing about sports that's great about it being just a game, is it's all fun and games at that point. Like I'll talk so much crap about Florida because they're our biggest rival, or Georgia Tech, who used to be a bigger rival of ours, but we beat them all the time. And sorry, like it's just boring now. But you know, like it's all in the name of fun. And it's cool because like when I moved to Colorado and then Boston, there is a level of camaraderie even in your rivals, because you're so used to like in the Southeast, like having these like these rivalries and like you hate them, whatever. But then when you're outside of the Southeast, it's really nice to see someone you can talk shit to, and they have the same reaction where they're actually like happy to be able to participate in this kind of tradition of like hating on each other when we're not actually. I don't wish ill on you, you know, like I don't actually want something poor to happen to you. I just want your football team to lose, you know, like that's it, you know. But when it comes to religion and politics, that's when it's actually like people are, you know, actually wishing ill on others. And it's like, yo, like, let's back up here for a second. Like we're all in this together, you know, like, yeah, we're going to disagree on things, you know, that's just human. But like, we should still like want people to have their best possible life, you know? Regardless of whether you think a blue or red on this issue. Like I still don't have anything against you as a human, unless you have some, like, if you think like all, you know, this is a terrible example, but like, if you think like, you know, all people of a certain race are inferior or should die, then okay, maybe I don't wish the best for you, because that's a pretty awful thing to think. But like, that's my point, is that everyone should just want the best for everyone. And sometimes, unfortunately, that doesn't happen. And, you know, it's sad.
Yeah,
it really is.
Well, I think another thing is like, we've learned to be tolerant of like people's other sports teams in a way where it's like, I'm not going to kill him over it, but I'm going to talk shit to him. But like certain ideologies, we were raised in a certain way where it's like, everybody else is wrong about this, and therefore like, and you're threatening your own existence unless you support this religion or this political party. And that's a dangerous thing that like we haven't learned to
100%.
deal with, because our parents have always told us like,
Yeah.
don't talk about politics to anybody because they're wrong, and don't bring it
What
up.
is
And
it?
you're gonna
Politics,
get into an
religion,
argument.
and like
And then
children, or how to raise children. Yeah, I don't remember the thing.
yeah, it's something like that. And that, I mean, those are the three major things that I feel like we should learn how to fucking talk about with everybody. Like we should be able to come to dinner and be like, what's your parenting like, and not be offended that like we have differences in parenting or religion.
I'm going to go back to
whatever,
to science, because that's the whole point. Like when I debate with people, like you might think that I'm getting fired up and like I'm getting mad at you, but no, I just legitimately enjoy like having like intellectual debates. And I had this roommate in college who's still one of my best friends this day, and we have a lot of disagreements in politics. We used to have more disagreements now, but I've moved actually closer to him along the political spectrum in recent years. But either way, we still have disagreements, but we talk about it, and we're still great friends. Like we can disagree on things and still like educate each other and have these difficult conversations. But like there is a way to have conversations and be able to it not to be fueled by emotion, or it can be fueled by emotion, but like you should, basically all I'm getting at after 3 hours is that I agree with you, is that those are things that we should be able to have conversations about in civil ways without getting at each other's throats. I mean, at some point you might have to agree to disagree. I mean, like, the abortion issue is the hot one right now. It always is hot in the US. But like, a lot of it goes down to religious views. And at that point, you're just going to have to accept that that's someone's religious view, and there's not much you can do to convince them otherwise, right? And sometimes it comes down to that. You're not going to find middle ground, but you don't necessarily have to hate that person because of it. I mean, that being said, I'm a male, and like I probably shouldn't tell people when to hate people when it comes to their abortion views, but like maybe it was a bad example, but
But that's another. Well, I think that's another thing too, is that we should be able for everybody to come to the table and share their opinions on these kinds of things, and be able to say, like, okay, I disagree with him, but I don't hate him because of his views, even no matter where he comes from or what he is, because it's like, that's how, like, it's the scientific method. It's like, it's constantly reevaluating where you are, where you stand on things, and how do we move forward, and how do we affect change. And it's an ongoing process that a lot of us aren't equipped to deal with, because we just haven't had that moment where we actually start to discuss things. We've just always understood it as like an argument, and fuck that guy, he's against me. But it's so much more complex than that. And I think it's like, I don't know, it's a skill set that I think we should all, strive to develop. Because I feel like you and I could probably disagree on a lot of political stuff, and we would still see value in that.
That's how you grow.
Well, I don't know if we
talking to people who have different. It's just boring if you only talk to people who have the same opinions on everything as you. Like, then how are you ever going to like? You're never born with like all of the right information. And I think it becomes harder as you get older to be able to change your mind about things. But like, also, when did it become such a bad thing to be able to change your mind on things? Like, that always drives me crazy, because it's like you can learn and be better informed and be like, oh, you know what? I was wrong about that. Now I think this now. And people are going to be like, oh, well, you're just a flip-flopper. It's like, no, I just learned what was inconsistent or incorrect about what I felt before. And now I'm a better person for it. Like, and I mean, it's weird.
The shit that I believed when I was 14, like, is way different from what I think now. And the thing is we have to be understanding of that. People are at a different point in their life, and it's there has to be some kind of process by which like we can allow people to grow. Like, you have to fail over and over and over again to become successful, and that's with everything in life. And it's the same thing with like developing a worldview. You can't expect everybody to just be like cohesively on this one page. And some people do things that they should be punished for or extremely apologetic for, but for the most case, it's like there needs to be a way for people to say, I was wrong about something and I've changed, and now I'm better for it. And I think you see it with a lot of like,
Yeah.
you know, people who got like canceled or whatever. They're starting to like make their way back into things, and people are starting to realize like, oh, they've changed, and you know, and some people should be
Yeah,
canceled
if you
rightfully
committed like
forever,
a
depending on what
crime
they've done.
or like sexually abused someone, then like yeah, you did
Right.
something really bad and you can't recover from that. But if it's like a tweet, you know, like it's like that from like
Right.
7 years ago, it's like if they've changed as a person and realized what they've done wrong, I think they should be able to like repent for that. You know.
Definitely. And how many times have people like, and man, like I've worked in jobs where I've worked with like
Mhm.
older white people who were just like unapologetically racist. And then like 10 minutes or 10 years later, like I've seen them again and been like, oh, they've
Oh,
changed
that's
as a
good. I'm
person.
glad that
Like,
they've been able to do that as an older
it's,
person.
and it's rare. It's not everybody. Some of them are still like racist, but you know, there's that
Mhm.
room for that, right? Where it's like if they tweeted something 20 years ago and they're looking for a job now, and like you know, that person is now different, and there has to be
Right.
room for you know saying that was a certain time and place, and they've
Right. I
learned
mean,
from that,
society
right?
is
So
always developing too, you know, like there are things I watch now that I watched 10 to 15 years ago. And I'm like, oh, that never would have flown like nowadays, you know?
oh yeah,
Um,
that's crazy, right? And it's wild to watch like movies from like the 1980s,
yeah.
and you're like,
Dude, like
wow, there's a
even
lot of
the old
racism in
James
here.
Bond movies, like with Sean Connery and stuff, so sexist, like so sexist.
So sexist, yeah,
Still, there's some great moments in those
unbelievable.
films,
Actually,
but yeah,
it's
there's other
oh
parts of
yeah.
it where you're just like, yikes, like that was a different
Well,
time.
and I think there's value in like
Yeah.
showing people this and saying like this was what we were like, and this is what
It
people
might give
thought
you
was
more hope
funny
in
because they were just
society
white
that we
people.
can
And
get better, you know? Like, oh,
yeah,
okay, well, at least we're not that bad anymore, you know?
yeah, yeah. It's like I tell my brother all the time, and like actually we're coming up on 3 hours, so like
Okay, we're no
I'm gonna
worries.
try and
Yeah. This
wrap
has
this
been
up
great, though, by
somehow.
the way, man. I've been
But
having a lot of fun.
yeah, this has been amazing. I definitely want to do this again with you, and like actually get into
Mhm.
production stuff. That'll be a whole fucking
Yep.
3 hour podcast on its own, I'm sure. But so I tell my brother all the time, like he showed me like Requiem for a Dream and
Oh, my
Kids when
God.
I was younger, which are
That's
like
deep.
two. I was like
That's
young
deep.
at the time. I was like two really
Yeah.
fucked up movies that completely changed how I operated in life, because it was I took it in with the like, and I took the understanding that like this was a certain time and place that in these movies, and like I was able to learn from what these people did essentially in this movie, that I think a lot of people would be like, don't
Right.
show your kids this ever because they're just fucked up movies. But I was like maybe like 12 or 13 at the time, and my brother was like,
Oh,
oh,
wow.
like screw it, watch it. And it changed how I saw a lot of people in New Jersey. We went through like a heroin epidemic here, where like people got like really like their lives got fucked up from like prescription medicine essentially. And
Like the opioid
yeah,
epidemic
the
or before
opiate,
that?
yeah,
Or
yeah,
yeah.
that's exactly what it was.
That's
And I had like dabbled in it myself, like with painkillers, and I saw people move on to heroin. And because I saw like Requiem for a Dream, I was like, nope, hardline,
nope.
can't do that, I'm out,
Nope.
and
Yeah.
just separated myself from it. And so there is like value in like these things that like we think are awful, right? Like we think that all this old racism that existed like should just be like deleted or whatever. I'm like, no, like it should.
Shows you how not to.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's a really interesting point of view. Like you should be able to watch these things and know that that was horrible,
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Then again, there's things like, you know, there's exceptions, like there's like reefer madness where you're just like, oh my God, if I smoke weed once, you know, I'm going to die.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
there's room for interpretation, but like, I definitely agree that there's like, but that once again, that was an old thing, and you see how things have changed over time. And it's like, if you see, I mean, that's why I think Roots was such a powerful
Oh my God, yeah,
thing, you know. I
yeah,
mean, like that like, if that doesn't scare you into thinking racist, or not scare you, but if that doesn't educate you on all the things that are wrong about racism, or not all the things, but a lot of the things, and why slavery was so awful, it's like, I don't know if there's much hope for you then, because that's a pretty damning interpretation.
Yeah,
Um,
there's
yeah,
something to be said for like learning from these major issues, right? That like you have to have some level of acceptance for the human race, like even having done
Mhm.
these things. Whereas like I think Germany is a great example of this. Like you go there, they're not hiding like everything that happened there, and they've kind of learned as a society like
No, but if you, God help you if you mention it. I've spent a lot of time in
yeah.
Germany, well, in Berlin at least, and it's like it's not something you want to bring up
Well, is
in
that
conversation. They are
well?
ashamed of
That's
it. Don't
why,
get me
right?
wrong.
They're
Yeah,
ashamed
yeah,
of it,
yeah.
but
They're
like
ashamed of it.
yeah,
Yeah. I mean, it's like I guess that would be the same thing as if you came over to the U.S. and you were just like, let's talk about slavery and what happened to Native Americans. You'd be like, yeah, I don't really want to talk to you right now. Like yeah, like that's a really dark moment of our history. Like, let's please not talk about that. So I guess you're right. Yeah, it's like let's just not go there.
yeah,
Like that,
yeah.
that we'd rather not.
I mean,
but you're absolutely right. They've done a lot to try and make up for what happened.
yeah.
And
I
I
think
do
also
appreciate that.
it's a
Yeah.
little different too, because like you go to Southern America or like the Southern states in America, and like there's Confederate flags in places and stuff, and you're like,
Oh yeah, it's
we haven't
shameful.
learned from that. Like what? Whereas like I feel like Germany maybe collectively has this shame that like some
Oh, it's
Americans are
100%
still
true, man.
flying Confederate flags. I'm like, you guys fucking lost
Didn't
and
learn anything.
haven't learned
And I
anything.
grew up amongst it, and it actually, like, I didn't understand, especially as a kid, like, because I grew up in Georgia, and the Georgia flag was still a Confederate flag until I was like 10 or 11 years old. And at that time, I like didn't understand, now I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe I grew up in a state that had a Confederate flag on it. Like, what?
It's wild.
But like, yeah, it is absolutely insane. I mean, it's like if Germany had a province that had like a swastika on the flag, like you would never see that.
Yeah.
Like it's not okay to like show, oh, well, it wasn't about slavery. Okay. Yeah, it was, first of all. But second of all, it's like, it's still a signal of oppression.
Yeah.
I mean, like, I don't know. Like, I'm a Southerner. I love a lot of things about the South and my home, but still showing Confederate flags on things is something I will never understand. And there were a lot of people I went to high school with that like would have like Confederate flag like stickers on their trucks. And at the time, I didn't.
Even for me in New Jersey, we had that. Like we have people that I went to high school with that like would rep a Confederate flag, and I'm like, how? Like, think about how crazy that is. That's crazy. That's insane. You're in New Jersey. Like, why is this? And we have like a certain section of New Jersey that's like also like it's like like Trump County pretty much still right now.
Most rural counties are going to be Trump Central, which I'm
tolerant of your political views and everything, but like if you're flying around a Confederate flag in 2022 in New Jersey, I'm a little confused, maybe. But anyway,
that's a good way of putting it. I'd say it's silly.
Yeah,
I think is a politically correct way of saying like if you're flying a Confederate flag, like it's silly.
Yeah,
that's just what I'm gonna say.
And I think here's the thing that I kind of want to end on is like there's always opportunity to learn from this. And it's like if you're watching this and you do rep the Confederate flag, it's like I would just like you to maybe like, just like don't write me off as someone like fuck that guy. Like essentially it's just like think about like why that might be a little bit of a silly thing, like you said. And I think there's an opportunity to learn from these kind of things instead of just like deleting history and saying like, like ignoring these things. We have to face them head on and accept that they did happen. And
it's okay to depict these things like we were saying about learning from old times, but just to add on to that, you just kind of think about how a person of color would feel seeing that. It's a signal of something else, or how a Jewish person feels seeing a swastika. Like it's things like that. What symbol would make you upset? Just think about that. What's your equivalent of a Confederate flag?
I have to say, like you're for a scientist, you have a lot of empathy, and I'm.
Oh well, thanks. I try, but I still have a lot of work to do.
Don't we all?
That's true. But man, I think that was a great way to wrap it up, and it's just been such an honor to be on here and a pleasure. I've had such a great time talking with you. That 3 hours flew by, and I would love to be on at any other point, and I just wish you the most success
Thanks so much,
this
dude.
and all your endeavors. Yeah. And
Yeah.
sorry I can't make it to the show in New
Oh,
York, but I'll be
yeah.
there for the next one.
You know what? I like you're there in spirit, and
I will definitely.
Well,
and give Gil a big ol' hug for me, please.
Oh, I definitely will.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
he's crashing with me, and
Oh, is he?
so,
Nice. Yeah.
and so I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, dude, definitely gonna do this again. And for the music producers who I'm sure are gonna check this out and be like, "Where's my,
Where's my iZotope talk?" Yeah.
We'll have to
I
do
want to
one.
know the secrets.
We'll have to do one specifically about production, maybe, because I feel like you and I could talk about anything and everything, and I didn't want to set a game plan, but maybe next time we will tackle production stuff, or maybe I'll let you, like, we'll do like a private one just for, because how many people are really that interested? Probably a lot of our fans, but we should definitely do one. But I feel like that's going to be another fucking 4 hours, which
it will,
yeah,
and it'll be fun. But I think there's a lot to learn from what we've talked about, anyways. Hopefully,
so
I mean, from our experience. I mean, I think everyone has the experience. Everyone has their own experiences, and everyone can learn from other people's experiences. Yeah. So, like, hopefully, that is something that people take away from this, and we will talk music production, I'm sure, at some point.
But before we end, let me just see if there's anything you want to shout out, promote, push, what you're working on. Do it up.
Yeah, thanks. Just listen to my music, please. Check it out. It's Cory Goldsmith. You can just look up my name on Google or Spotify or Apple Music or whatever. I hope you like it. And yeah, I have some show announcements coming up soon that will take place somewhere in Europe. I'm really excited about that, and there's more to come. And so if you're in that area and you're listening to this, just all of Europe, no, it'll be something that has to do with ADE, and I'm very excited about it. So yeah, keep an eye out for that and new tunes, etc. And yeah, like anybody's paying attention to my journey, I appreciate you, and yeah, I hope that you like the tunes. That's pretty much all I got to say. Also, check if you're a music producer, try some iZotope plugins out. We got 10-day free trials on everything, so you don't have to buy it. You can try it out, see if you like it, and then if you do like it, you can maybe subsidize my salary a little bit. That'd be great.
That's like the easiest sale though, because like the products are so great. Like you don't have to even like tell anybody who's a music producer knows, like, you guys are killing it. Same thing with your music, man. Just keep it up. Keep doing what you're doing.
Really appreciate it.
And
same goes to you though, man.
Thank you.
Always love the stuff you make.
Appreciate it, dude. I got to make some more. I've been a little inactive, want to do, different things. And, but I think this is an inspiring conversation. I'm definitely going to roll out some new tunes. All right, brother. Yeah. I appreciate it. Man. Thanks again, dude.
Of course. Thank you.
Take care.